Chapter 990. Teacher. Teacher. Your disciple is unfilial, the third prince cried his heart out. His already weak body could not take it any longer. His pathetic appearance did not seem noble at all. He was not just crying for Wu Liba. He was crying for the fate he was about to face and the predicament he was in. Wu Liba had led thousands of elites to cover the retreat of him and the first prince. Although they had successfully escaped, they did not have many weapons on them. They did not even have food or clean water. They had no supplies and were starving. They could only eat grass and tree bark. A few months ago, there were 180,000 elites in the northern borderline camp. Including the 30,000 elites brought by the first prince, there were 210,000. 210,000 northern borderline warriors. Now there were less than 20,000 left. They were all defeated soldiers. The nightmare did not end there. The news of Wu Liba's death gave them another heavy blow. The third prince cried. The first prince was distraught. He wanted nothing more than to hack his younger brother to death so that he could have some peace. What's the use of crying now? The most important thing now is to contact all the major tribes in the northern borderline to unite against Lu Buwei. Only then will we be able to face the general. The first prince was agitated. They had not completely shaken off their pursuers. They could go see Wu Liba at any time. Teacher treats me like his own son. Am I not allowed to cry for him? The third prince calmed himself down. But his eyes were still red. But the first prince was right. Staying alive was the most important thing now. There was hope as long as there was life. He thought of the main culprit and gritted his teeth. It's all ninth prince's fault. If not for him, teacher would not have died so young. If not for the ninth prince, the useless teammate, ruining a good hand, the northern borderline would not have suffered such a huge loss. The first prince said, him? Maybe he's already in the belly of the fish. Many living people with intact limbs had been killed by the flood. Ninth prince had gotten wind on horseback. How could he still be alive? The third prince felt better after hearing the first prince's words. Little did they know that the person they were talking about had not only not died, but had luckily survived. Unfortunately, good luck had its limits. The ninth prince was captured by the soldiers who were looking for the living. Everyone saw that he was dressed extravagantly and kept an eye on him. On one hand, he brought him back to the main camp, on the other hand, he investigated his identity. Unexpectedly, he was the former acting king of the northern borderline. Although he was the acting king, he was still the king. The soldier quickly reported the matter to Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji didn't want to see him at first, but she wanted to see what he looked like out of curiosity after learning that he could survive a stroke. The ninth prince was carried into the main tent. Because he had stopped taking the medicine, the signs of the ninth prince's stroke were slightly relieved. Previously, he could only move his eyes, but now he could move his neck. The ninth prince had been mentally prepared to beg for mercy, but he never expected to see the white moonlight in his heart in the main tent. Sun Wan, the ninth prince stared straight at Sun Wan, his eyes filled with the pain and accusation of being betrayed. His gaze was too intense, and no one could ignore it even if they wanted to. You know him? Jiang Pengji asked Sun Wan with a smile. He seems to be an old acquaintance of yours from the north borderline. Sun Wan said with a smile, this person is the ninth son of the king of the northern borderline. He's really stupid. It's a good idea to use him to kill someone else. When the ninth prince heard Sun Wan's words, his heart ached uncontrollably. His eyes were bloodshot, as if he wanted to cut Sun Wan into pieces. It was a waste of his trust in Sun Wan, and he was even worried about his disappearance. Unexpectedly, Sun Wan was actually a spy sent by the traitor Lu. Thinking of how he had been fooled by Sun Wan, how he had caused his 9 brothers to kill each other, and how he had caused the northern borderline tribe to fall apart. The ninth prince's expression turned ugly. He looked at Sun Wen with eyes full of thousands of knives. Unfortunately, these knives could not kill. If that's the case, this person is a meritorious minister. Wasn't the ninth prince a meritorious minister who had helped Jiang Pengji deal with the northern borderline? Sun Wen teased, considering that this person has made a great contribution, my lord, don't let him off easily. Jiang Pengji said, rewards and punishments are clear and impartial. Since he has made a meritorious contribution, naturally, we can't neglect him. Listening to the conversation between the two, the ninth prince's eyes were filled with fear. He tried to open his mouth to beg for mercy, but in the end, his mouth was full of saliva. Jiang Pengji said, drag him away. Let him accompany Wu Liba. No matter how much the ninth prince struggled, he died in the end. His corpse was hung beside Wu Liba, drifting with the wind. While Jiang Pengji was clearing the spoils of war and advancing the battlefront to the center of the northern borderline, the situation in the world underwent many changes. Among them, the most shocking news happened in Zhongzhou. Tens of thousands of refugees broke through the defense line of the palace and rushed into the palace, burning, killing, and looting. Almost no one in the royal family survived. Men were smashed into meat paste by the agitated refugees, women were humiliated to death, and all the women in the palace became captives of the refugees. At the same time, the forces led by the Nye family recruited soldiers and bought horses in the name of purging the rebels, establishing an independent state. Seeing that Zhongzhou had become like this, Beiyuan and Xichang also wanted a share of the spoils. Unfortunately, the two countries had been in conflict in recent years. Many vassal lords were plotting their own schemes and could not spare any time to help. Apart from that, Dongqing and Nanqing did not rest for a moment. Jiang Pengji, Huang Song, and Su Bei formed an alliance. Although it was only to support each other, they also gained many benefits from it. The person in charge of forming an alliance with Su Bei was Yang Si. Yang Si was now in charge of Hu County. He represented his lord in forming an alliance with Su Bei. With Jiang Pengji's tacit consent, Yang Si went to Su Bei as a representative to provide some military support. Originally, the brothers Su Bei and Su Fei were evenly matched, but with Jiang Pengji's intervention, the balance tilted in Su Bei's favor. Su Fei suffered repeated defeats and lost half of Zhe County. He was forced to retreat to Hu County and his power was greatly reduced. Compared to Su Bei's relaxed state, Huang Song was not so lucky. His opponent was the Meng family that controlled the entire Zhangzhou. The pressure was immense. Huang Song knew the difference between him and the Meng family. It was impossible to fight them head-on. The losses of attacking far outweighed the losses of defending. He only needed to delay the Meng family's pace. He did not need to fight them to the death. With this thought in mind, Huang Song and his strategists chose the safest plan: defense. Defend to the death and not fight. Huang Song forged himself into an iron tortoise. He was armed from head to toe, even to his teeth. No matter how the Meng family clamored, he would not care. At first, the Meng family was patient. However, as time passed, good news about Jiang Pengji in the northern borderline came out one after another. The Meng family could not sit still any longer. They launched several strong attacks, but Huang Song's side could always predict the future. After a few confrontations, the Meng family did not gain much of an advantage. Both sides entered a state of struggle. No one was willing to take a step back. The war in Dongqing was at a stalemate. Yang Tao was doing very well in Nanqing. He invaded Nanqing's territory in the name of punitive expedition against the fake emperor. In just half a year, he had already gained a firm foothold. Chapter 991. And Shui stared at the intelligence report on the table as if he wanted to stare two holes in it. The more he read, the angrier he became. He angrily gritted his teeth and glared at her. He slammed his palm heavily on the table. Bang! There was a loud bang. The table shook slightly from the slam, and the loud sound pierced the eardrums. The sudden sound shocked everyone, and they didn't dare to be distracted. Lu Zheng happened to pass by. He heard the commotion in the room and stepped in. He smiled faintly and asked, "What happened? What made you so angry, my lord?" Seeing that it was Lu Zheng, An Chui calmed down a little, but there was still anger on his face. Panting heavily, he raised his hand and handed the report to Lu Zheng. His face was full of anger. "Look, military counselor. This Yang Tao is too much." Surprise flashed in Lu Zheng's eyes, but he didn't show it on his face. He raised his hand and took the bamboo slip An Chui handed him, unfolded it, and took a look. "So it's about this." Lv Zheng skimmed through the contents of the bamboo scroll. His tone carried a hint of understanding. He was not surprised by the contents. He looked up at An Chui, who was still angry. Amused, Lv Zheng asked, "Why are you so angry, my lord?" An Chui choked. He didn't expect Lu Zheng to react this way. How could he not be angry? An outsider occupied Nanchung's land. If he wasn't angry, would he line the streets to welcome Yang Tao? "Military counselor, you already knew about Yang Tao's plan?" Lu Zheng smiled confidently and said, "When the fake emperor escaped from Zhangzhou into Nanchung's territory, I already expected this situation. Most of the feudal lords in Dongqing have grown up. Yang Tao doesn't have a high chance of winning against them, but the risk is high. Yang Tao can't just sit and wait. In comparison, using the fake emperor as an excuse to meddle in Nanchung's territory is less risky. The fake emperor was no match for Yang Tao. After escaping to Nanchung, his days became more and more difficult. If Yang Tao only went for the fake emperor, the weeds at the fake emperor's grave were already as tall as a person. How could he jump around? It was obvious that he was using the fake emperor as an excuse to deliberately encroach on Nanchung's territory. When An Chui heard Lu Zheng's explanation, he felt a surge of anger in his heart. Of course, this anger wasn't directed at Lu Zheng, it was directed at Yang Tao. In An Chui's usual way of thinking, Nanchung's territory belonged to the people of Nanchung. If an outsider were to encroach on Nanchung's territory, that would be considered an invasion. What was the difference between Yang Tao's actions and the four factions of Nanman? Who could tolerate the fact that their country had fallen into the hands of outsiders? When he thought up to here, An Chui couldn't help but feel heartfelt sorrow. Why was Yang Tao so daring? It was because Nanchung was already destroyed. If the four factions of Nanman had not destroyed Nanchung's country, how could a mere Yang Tao, a mere duke, be able to strut around in Nanchung? Seeing An Chui's silence, Lu Zheng could more or less guess what was going on. He sighed and said, "My lord, this matter is already a foregone conclusion. Our greatest threat is not Yang Tao. No matter what, Yang Tao was a pure-blooded Han man. It was better for Nanchung to fall into his hands than to be trampled by the four factions of Nanman." An Chui pulled himself together and suppressed his grief and indignation. Lu Zheng was right. His greatest threat was not Yang Tao, but the four factions of Nanman that had been wreaking havoc in Nanchung. An Chui said, "Thank you for your guidance, military counselor. Otherwise, I would have been stuck in a dead end." Lu Zheng declined humbly. He could see clearly that although An Chui said that he had thought things through, he still disliked Yang Tao's actions. "I have something to discuss with you, my lord." An Chui said, "Military counselor, feel free to speak your mind. I will support you with all my might." Lu Zheng said, "I wish to send someone to discuss an alliance with Yang Tao." The moment he said this, An Chui's expression darkened. "Military counselor, what do you mean?" Lu Zheng said, "Yang Tao is an outsider at the end of the day. He looks powerful, but he is actually full of hidden dangers. If the two families work together, we can complement each other's strengths. Even though Lu Zheng had already thought of a way to help An Shui plan, An Shui's foundation was weak. It would be too slow for him to plan alone. Yang Tao's strengths were obvious, but so were his weaknesses. It was the same for An Shui. If the two families worked together, they might be able to complement each other's strengths. An Shui helped Yang Tao integrate completely into Nansheng's power, while Yang Tao helped An Shui further expand his influence. An Shui was exasperated. He asked, "You can ally with anyone. Why must you choose Yang Tao?" This time, it was Lu Zheng's turn to be silent. What could he say? To tell the truth, he had hurt An Shui's pride. An Shui wanted to ally with someone else, but that person did not care about his meager resources. On the other hand, Yang Tao's power was neither too big nor too small, and he was an outsider. His overall strength was about the same as An Shui's. If he allied with Yang Tao, the two families would have about the same say. This would be beneficial to both sides. After a while, An Shui calmed down. He comforted Lu Zheng gently. Lu Zheng was what he relied on to rise up and take revenge on the four factions of Nanman. No matter what, he could not provoke the other. This matter, I'll leave it to Xiaofan to handle. If an alliance was beneficial to him, An Shui would accept it even if the partner was Yang Tao. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Lu Zheng's lips curled into a sneer, but the smile did not reach his eyes. Instead, a flash of disappointment flashed through them. Under Lu Zheng's mediation, Yang Tao and An Shui's forces formed an alliance. For the sake of territory and benefits, the feudal lords of the world fought until their heads bled. Jiang Pengji, who was far away in the northern borderline, was also slowly reaping her spoils of war. She led the army with Yi River as the boundary and advanced toward the northern borderline, occupying several horse farms and tribes. The battle at Yi River directly caused great damage to the northern borderline, and they fled upon hearing the news. The scale of the flood was too great, and it came too suddenly. The tribes and horse farms along the coast were almost completely destroyed, and the northern borderline suffered countless losses. The weather was hot, and the corpses of Wu Liba and the ninth prince began to rot and stink within a few days. Report, there are thousands of herdsmen blocking the way ahead. The messenger hurriedly sent the news to the main tent of the central army. Thousands of herdsmen? Jiang Pengji frowned. What are they trying to do? She was not bloodthirsty, and the war was definitely against the regular army of the northern borderline. As long as the ordinary herdsmen behaved themselves, she would not deliberately kill them. Li Yun followed. He frowned and said, "Those herdsmen voluntarily sought refuge with the Lord, voluntarily sought refuge?" Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows. Look at your unhappy expression. It doesn't look like a good thing. What conditions did they offer? If they were sincere in seeking refuge, Li Yun would definitely show his joy on his face. But now he frowned. It was obvious that it was not as simple as seeking refuge. As expected, Li Yun said, the leaders of the herdsmen's tribes made a request. They are willing to pledge allegiance to us, but we have to hand over Wu Liba's corpse. Wu Liba's corpse. The entire tribe came to seek refuge. Is there really nothing fishy going on? Li Yun said, from what I can see, it seems to be the case. Every family has brought along their entire family. If it was a trick, they would definitely not have brought along their relatives and children. What do they want Wu Liba's corpse for? Li Yun said, the leader of the small tribe said that he hopes to return Wu Liba to the embrace of God as soon as possible, so that he can have a more dignified death. Chapter 992. The entire tribe surrendered just to collect Wu Liba's corpse. Hearing Li Yun's words, the expressions of the people in the tent varied. Some were indifferent, some could not bear it, and some were deeply moved. Although Wu Liba was their enemy, there were still people who remembered him after his death. Wu Liba's life was not in vain. Jiang Pengji looked at Li Yun and asked plainly, "That's their only request?" Li Yun cupped his fists and replied, "Indeed, that's their only request." In the beginning, Li Yun also thought that the small tribe wanted to strike a stone with an egg, but they brought along their families, men, women, young and old, and even infants sleeping in swaddling clothes. Li Yun sent someone to negotiate and ask for their intentions. Hearing their request, he was stunned on the spot. It was not unusual for the entire tribe to surrender. What was unusual was their reason for surrendering. At that moment, Li Yun felt some envy towards Wu Liba. If he was in the same situation as Wu Liba, would there be someone who would give up everything just to get his corpse back? "My lord, should we agree to this?" Li Yun saw that Jiang Pengji did not respond for a long time and could not help but ask. Jiang Pengji said in a low voice, "Agree to it. Get someone to collect Wu Liba's corpse and prepare a better coffin for them." To her, Wu Liba was just a stumbling block that she had kicked away. To the herdsmen of the northern borderline, Wu Liba was probably a hero or even a religion, and they were willing to give up everything for him. From the side, it could be seen that Wu Liba was worthy of respect. Since someone was willing to protect his corpse, why not agree to it? Speaking of this, Jiang Pengji suddenly thought of the ninth prince. They did not say what to do with the ninth prince's corpse. Li Yun recalled carefully and said with certainty, they did not mention the ninth prince. Forget it, buy one get one free. The ninth prince's corpse can be considered as a bonus and sent over. As for how they deal with it, that's up to them. Jiang Pengji revealed a faint smile of mockery. The ninth prince was really a failure. "Yes, I will do it now." Li Yun cupped his fists and retreated. As he walked, his armor made a crisp sound. Li Yun left and the audience regained their senses from this brief interlude. Mantian is a small white cloud. Old Wu's death was not a loss. A tribe was actually willing to surrender for him. Bao Bao Lai Kai Tang, although Old Wu's death was tragic, there were still people who remembered him after his death, which meant that he was not a failure. Guzi Xiao Yugan. TSK, you guys are really sentimental. Don't think this is so good. Maybe this tribe is the streamer's army. Even an idiot would know what the host's reputation in the northern borderline was like. The northern borderline would definitely say that the host was a butcher who killed people like scything flax, threatening the people in their territory. However, it was also possible for ordinary people to surrender in order to survive and protect their young and old. Bad mouse again, sigh, am I the only one who feels sorry for the ninth prince? The prince is Liangzi's army. The audience in the streaming room sighed. Some felt that Wu Liba had died a worthy death, some pitied the ninth prince for dying quietly, some reminded Jiang Pengji to be careful of the northern borderline's fake surrender, and some continued to be onlookers. There were too many viewers in the streaming room, and there were also too many bullet screens. Jiang Pengji could only block the bullet screens frequently. Li Yun instructed his subordinates to collect Wu Liba's corpse, wipe off the tainted blood, change into clean clothes, and then place it in a pitch-black coffin. As for the rotting corpse of the ninth prince, Li Yun ordered someone to pack it up and send it over. When the herdsmen of the small tribe saw the coffin, they hugged each other and cried bitterly. Their sobs were filled with endless sorrow. After crying enough, the chief of the tribe took the initiative to surrender, and the herdsmen behind him all performed the northern borderline's ritual of submission. Has the Lord thought about how to settle these people? The tribe was not big. There were no more than 10,000 men and women, old and young, but there were about 5,000 young adults. If they were allowed to stay in the main camp, it would be hard to guarantee that they would not turn traitor at the last minute. When the time comes, they would collaborate with the northern borderline from both inside and outside, which would be a disaster instead. Rather than leaving them on the battlefield and becoming a hidden danger, it was better to send them back to Chongzhou and other places in batches. Jiang Pengji had also considered this point. She said, let's leave this matter to Wenjing. These people surrendered voluntarily, so we can't treat them like ordinary captives. How about this, send someone to register them, then send them to the administrative areas in batches, one household as a unit. That's good too, to prevent any setbacks on the road to victory. Qiguan Rang furrowed his brows. How about this, let them follow the grain team back to Chongzhou. In order to ensure the safety of the grain transportation route, the return journey was different. Letting these herdsmen follow the returning grain team to Chongzhou would not only prevent the exposure of the grain transportation route, but also reduce the expenditure of additional manpower. Before the tribe chose to surrender, they were already prepared for the worst, but in the end, they were told that they would only be sent to the Central Plains. Everyone looked at each other, their tensed nerves finally relaxed. There were even some women from the northern borderline who were carrying their children and secretly cried tears of joy. They carefully placed Wu Liba's corpse in a proper place and managed to arrange a decent funeral. Apart from this small interlude, Jiang Pengji's army advanced like a hot knife through butter, following the Yi River all the way to the north. The northern borderline had a vast territory. Its overall surface area was only 20 to 30% smaller than Dongqing. However, most of the land in the northern borderline was not suitable for human habitation, so the population was not abundant. The number of commoners was only 1/10 of that of Dongqing. The total population was less than 2 million people, which was considered sparse. In the battle between Jiang Pengji and the northern borderline at the Yi River, the number of people who died in the war and those who drowned in the flood had exceeded 150,000. If the people who were captured by Jiang Pengji and those who surrendered voluntarily were included, the total loss of the northern borderline was close to 200,000. This number was shocking and ruthlessly poked the eyeballs of the nobles of the northern borderline. Just thinking about it made their hearts ache. Faced with the approaching enemy, the tribes of the northern borderline had different thoughts, but in the face of disaster, they had no choice but to join forces. Although they had joined forces, they were not on the same page. On the day of the Yi River's flood, Wu Liba led the troops to cover the rear, while the eldest prince and the third prince led the main force to escape. At last count, they had less than 10,000 troops. Even though there were injured soldiers who returned one after another, the total number of troops was only 15,000, and many of them were disabled. They did not have military supplies and rations, and the troops under them did not even have much combat power. In the northern borderline, they could only be considered as the weakest. When the major forces of the northern borderline gathered, they did not even have the right to speak. Instead, they were reduced to minor characters. With the support of Wu Liba, the third prince became the acting king, but this acting king was not recognized by the others. Faced with the pressure of the strong troops, the first thing they thought of was not how to defend against the enemy, but how to squeeze together and elect the acting king. Chapter 993. You're still thinking of fighting for power when the strong army is here? He was just a substitute king. If the northern borderline was gone, the substitute king was nothing. The third prince's words sounded like he was showing off and ridiculing them. Third brother, it's easy for you to say that. You've been a substitute king, so of course you can say that, but we haven't. The third prince had been a substitute king. Although it was only for a few days, he was better than the other brothers. The third prince's face turned green and white, and he almost spat out the blood in his chest. If the teacher was watching from heaven and saw the northern borderline and the scene of internal strife, what would he think? The third prince said, "Aren't you letting Lu Shi take advantage of you?" The other brothers' faces turned cold. Some were dismissive, some secretly rolled their eyes, and some sneered. The meeting ended on a bad note. The prince's military strength was almost equal, and no one could defeat the other with an overwhelming victory. The third prince walked out of the tent in a daze, followed closely by his brother, the fifth prince. "Third brother, don't blame me for my harsh words." The third prince turned his head to look at his younger brother, who had tricked him. If the fifth prince had not held him back, perhaps he would have become the king of the northern borderline with the support of Wu Liba. How could the idiot ninth prince have the chance to trap hundreds of thousands of northern borderline warriors? If he had been the king from the beginning, the northern borderline would not have been tricked by Lu Shi. Say what? The third prince asked coldly. We're all father's sons. No one is born lower than anyone else. The fifth prince looked around to make sure no one was around before saying, if you can be a substitute king, so can others. What right do you have to act like you've worked hard for the northern borderline to scold us brothers? I know what the other brothers are thinking. They'd rather give it to an outsider than be taken advantage of by their own brothers. The third prince's face turned pale. The fifth prince continued, you have no supplies and no food now. You're just living under someone else's roof. You'd better behave yourself. With that, the fifth prince walked away with his head held high, feeling unprecedentedly carefree. His third brother studied under Wu Liba. When he interacted with his brothers, he always put on an arrogant look. He had long since found this person an eyesore. Now that he had ruthlessly crushed his spirit, there was no need to mention how carefree he was. In addition to a few princes in the northern borderline, there were also other noble tribes. These people also had a lot of troops in their hands. The princes tried their best to rope in the nobles of the northern borderline to increase their own bargaining chips. In the end, the sixth prince won. After all, the sixth prince's mother's family was the most influential and had the most connections. After his successful victory, the sixth prince decisively reorganized his troops and gathered his advisors to give him advice. The quality of the advisors was uneven, and everyone had their own opinions. In addition, the rules of the northern borderline were not strict, so the main tent was as lively as a vegetable market. Some people felt that Jiang Pengji's previous victory over the north borderline was mostly due to luck. There was nothing to be afraid of. Some people felt that Wu Liba was too old, that he was not good at commanding troops, and that his mistakes in commanding were the root cause of the northern borderline's defeat. Of course, in addition to these two groups of people, there were also people who tried to smooth things over and sing praises. The third prince's face darkened after listening to them for a few days. Huh. You idiots, if that Lu thief is really so easy to deal with, then I will be here to congratulate you on your early triumphant return. After he finished speaking, the third prince directly flicked his sleeves and left. Seeing that, the first prince, who was standing beside him, also stood up and followed him. Third prince, aren't you giving others a handle by saying this? The first prince was exasperated and hurriedly stopped the third prince. Seeing that the person who came was the first prince, the third prince's expression softened slightly. It was probably because the two of them had gone through life and death together, so their relationship was better than before. What do you mean by giving others a handle? I'm just speaking the truth. They underestimated that Lu thief, and sooner or later, they will suffer a great loss. As the third prince said this, he could not help but think of his teacher who had taught him. His eyes became slightly wet. These people are really going to waste teacher's efforts. The first prince chose to remain silent. Compared to his few arrogant and unrestrained brothers, the first prince trusted the third prince's brains more. If the third prince's brains were not good, why did Wu Liba choose the third prince out of the 9 sons of the king of the northern borderline? What should we do? Watch them make mistakes? The first prince could not help but frown. He still had some self-awareness. He and the interests of the northern borderline were tied together. If the northern borderline prospered, he would be fine. If the northern borderline was unlucky, he would also be finished. If the northern borderline perished, Jiang Pengji would not let him off. The sixth prince is easily persuaded. Every time he hesitates, he likes to listen to the advice of the elders in the maternal family. One should never underestimate the abilities of the northern borderline's relatives. They were more powerful than the relatives in the Central Plains. They were very skilled at controlling puppets. Wasn't the sixth prince a puppet in the hands of the relatives in the maternal family? Without the help of the relatives, how could the sixth prince be the king? The third prince's face was full of worry. He said, "Now we can only take one step at a time. I hope they are not too stupid." At the same time, the third prince's angrily leaving also angered the sixth prince. The sixth prince exerted pressure on his advisors, forcing them to come up with a feasible battle plan as soon as possible. Needless to say, without pressure, there would be no motivation. After the sixth prince pressured them, the advisors indeed came up with a brilliant plan. Will this really work? The sixth prince hesitated. The advisor said, "The traitor Lu previously accepted the tribes that surrendered. It shows that the other party is not very vigilant. The acting king can start from here and order a tribe to pretend to surrender and gain her trust. When the time is ripe, we can coordinate from the inside and outside. The traitor Lu will definitely be defeated." The sixth prince carefully considered the advisor's suggestion. The more he thought about it, the more likely it was. Finally, he made a decision and said firmly, "Okay, then let's do it." The advisor said, "I heard that the traitor Lu has many advisors and countless capable people around him. In order to avoid being seen through by the other party, the acting king needs to pay attention to some details." The sixth prince asked, "What details?" The advisor said, "I heard that the tribes that surrendered previously almost all surrendered with their families. Only then did the traitor Lu believe it. If the acting king wants to design a plan, we must follow it. Otherwise, I'm afraid it will be difficult to gain the trust of the traitor Lu. Instead, it will arouse the other party's suspicion." The sixth prince frowned, then suddenly relaxed his eyebrows. "Do as you say. If we can capture the traitor Lu alive, I will definitely give you a great credit. I will reward you with the title of nobility and 10,000 cattle and sheep." The advisor happily agreed. The third prince knew the sixth prince's plan and was a little surprised. It's not that they are completely brainless, the third prince thought about it. The feasibility of this plan was very high. Jiang Pengji had already accepted the tribes that surrendered, so her vigilance had already been lowered. At this time, if another tribe surrendered, she would not get to the bottom of it. She might be able to fool them. Chapter 994. The advisor was encouraged by the sixth prince. He thought quickly and suddenly came up with another plan. "Acting king, I heard that Lu Shi is the eldest legitimate daughter and not the only one. Lu Shi has a son of a concubine." The advisor quickly thought of a plan to sow discord in his heart. He said, "The Han family of the Central Plain has always despised women. Even if there are no sons in the family business will be passed on to the stepson and not to the daughter. No matter how capable Lu Shi is still an unmarried daughter. A married daughter is like spilled water. If she is married, she will belong to the groom's family. If she returns to the bride's family, she will be a guest. The Han family of the Central Plain does not have the habit of handing over the inheritance of their ancestors to women. No matter how capable a woman is, it will be a man who inherits the family business. Otherwise, it will be a dead family." The sixth prince was a little confused. He quickly asked, "What do you mean?" The advisor said, "Acting king, no matter how good Lu Shi is at war, Lu Shi is still alive. In the words of the Han family of the Central Plain, filial piety can crush her. She is just an unmarried daughter. No matter how much she earns, it will be a wedding dress for the concubine's son in the future." The sixth prince nodded as he listened. He faintly pondered. "You mean, to sow discord between Lu Shi and her brother? Why not let her brother compete with her?" Jiang Pengji had not relied on her family background or connections to get to where she was today. In other words, she had built such a large territory from scratch. If she was forced by Lu Shi to hand over everything she earned to her brother because she was a woman, how could she not feel resentful? From the perspective of the brother, it was reasonable for him to take everything from his legitimate sister because he was the one who would carry on the bloodline of the Lu family. Everything that his unmarried sister had fought for should belong to him. If Jiang Pengji was unwilling to hand it over, it would be robbery to her brother. The advisor nodded solemnly and patted the other party's horse until it was comfortable. The acting king is wise. That is exactly what I mean. The advisor smiled. If there is trouble in the rear, Lu Shi will naturally not care about the front line. If he could not care about the front line, it was naturally impossible for him to find out that there was something fishy about the tribe that pretended to surrender. The sixth prince nodded and looked as if he had a sudden realization. Then this matter. I will leave it to you. Be sure to do it properly. The sixth prince was a typical man of the northern borderline. His brain was filled with muscles. He respected strength and advocated the supremacy of violence. No with a brain, no with his fists, no with his fists. As long as he had the power, there would be people to plan for him. The advisor smiled and said, I will not let you down. Only by working on both sides could he quickly see results. On one hand, the sixth prince manipulated the tribes to pretend to surrender, and on the other, he set fire to Jiang Pengji's rear. In order to make Jiang Pengji lower her guard, the sixth prince deliberately withdrew some of his troops so that she could advance more steadily. Jiang Pengji didn't get carried away with her victory. Instead, her face darkened and she ordered the army to regroup. Qiguan Rang and Wei Ci were the first to notice the abnormality. Qiguan Rang did not ask much and instead handed the task to Wei Ci. Jiang Pengji didn't stop what she was doing. She just lifted her eyelids. Although she didn't have any other expression, her gaze was gentle. Lu Wei said with, he said with, he, Lord. Lu, with, king. In private, the Lord did not put on any airs. She could often play with her subordinates, laughing and scolding without restraint. On formal occasions, she was more steady. Her expression changed very little. If one did not observe carefully or did not understand her well enough, it would be difficult to notice. Wei Ci could feel her emotions. She was not happy and even a little angry. Because of this? Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows and asked, Zixiao, don't you think we won too easily? Wei Ci frowned. Lord, do you suspect that the northern borderline has other plans? Jiang Pengji said, No, I just can't stand the impetuous atmosphere in the camp. Let's take a break and let them cool down. Wei Ci thought for a while and understood Jiang Pengji's intention. Since the war in the northern borderline began, the enemies they encountered had all been defeated by them. They had hardly suffered any setbacks. Now that they had a smooth journey, the enemy was terrified. From the generals to the soldiers, they were all impetuous. Jiang Pengji could not destroy their morale, but she could delay them and let them calm down. Wei Ci breathed a sigh of relief and said, If that's the case, I'm relieved. Jiang Pengji asked in return, What else did you think it was? Wei Ci was stunned for a moment. He could not help but raise his head and look straight into her eyes. Lord, Jiang Pengji said, coincidentally, I also have something to ask you. Wei Ci readily said, My lord, please ask. I will tell you everything I know. Jiang Pengji said, Between me and Lady Wei, which is more important? Since the war in the northern borderline began, this was a rare opportunity for her to be alone with Wei Ci. She wanted to ask some questions clearly. Qiguan Rang reminded her that beating around the bush and staying silent would not solve the problem. Going straight to the point might be more effective. Wei Ci was speechless. His eyes were full of astonishment. Which is more important? Wei Ci smiled bitterly. You can't have your cake and eat it too. No matter how you answer this question, there will always be something unsatisfactory. For a son of an aristocratic family who had received an orthodox education, the family bloodline was far more important than anything else. This was what every son had to support. However, Wei Ci was different from ordinary people. His experience in his previous life made him more open-minded than anyone else. Between the family and her, which was more important? Was there even a need to think about it? Naturally, my lord, Wei Ci said softly but firmly. No one can be more important than you in Ci's heart. Jiang Pengji looked straight at him and said in a low voice, then, Zixiao, are you willing to be a lone official by my side? What was a lone official? A remote official who was isolated, helpless, or not placed in an important position. Apart from that, it also referred to people who had their own thoughts and personal integrity. They did not pursue fame, wealth, or power, but fawned on those in power. Jiang Pengji asked him if he was willing to be a lone official by her side. Her meaning was already very clear. If he chose her, Wei Ci had to cut ties with Lady Wei cleanly. Other than her, Wei Ci could not be loyal to anyone else. Of course, there was a deeper meaning to this question. Wei Ci's lips moved. My lord, if one day the heavens warn us that the emperor will not be passed down for one generation and Huangfu will take over, will you believe it? Jiang Pengji frowned when she heard that. A warning from the heavens? What kind of warning is that? A meteorite falls from the sky as a warning, and words are carved on the meteorite. Before Wei Ci could finish his words, he saw that his lord's eyes were filled with the words, "Are you stupid?" Chapter 995. Wei Ci's heart was filled with warmth. No matter how others slandered him, at least the person in front of him believed that he was innocent. This knowledge filled his entire body with a joyful emotion. Jiang Pengji said, "Don't tell me that you died because of this?" Wei Ci was still not used to it. Although his disguise had long been exposed by the other party, he still felt strange that his lord had accepted him so calmly and mentioned his past life. That feeling was hard to describe. If he had to describe it in words, it would be similar to, he talked about his first love with his wife. Her Majesty and his lord were obviously the same person, but Wei Ci felt embarrassed, as if he had a foot in two boats. No. Wei Ci denied it. Although he had thought of seeking death several times during that period, he couldn't resist the guard sent by Her Majesty who were watching him too closely. I won't let the same thing happen again. Jiang Pengji said, Wenzheng and I had a sincere talk. I think he was right. When it comes to interests, we don't worry about scarcity but inequality. If you were in such an embarrassing situation, it can only be said that Jiang Pengji was too negligent and incompetent. She couldn't be impartial and gave others a reason to attack you. It's her fault that she couldn't protect you. Wei Ci said decisively, no, Her Majesty did a good job. I failed to live up to her arrangements and expectations. Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows and asked, why do you say that? Wei Ci opened his mouth, his face full of guilt and self-blame. I've seen it all over again. I've seen many things clearly. I'm responsible for the meteorite warning. In his previous life, Her Majesty wasn't biased. He was just too stupid to see his identity and situation clearly. Although it wasn't made public, Wei Ci often stayed in the palace at night. His relationship with Her Majesty, even if they hid it well and most people didn't know, how could Qiguan Rang and Fengzhen not guess? These counselors were demons who could walk and were difficult to deal with. They knew but didn't say it. They probably chose to tacitly agree. Her Majesty was impartial and the important court officials chose to tacitly support her. It should have been a balanced situation. But Wei Ci did something stupid. Wei Ci had just been reminded of this stupid thing. The key was the Wei family. He didn't have a deep relationship with the Wei family, but he didn't cut ties with them. Knowing that the Wei family was in dire straits, he also tried to find ways to support the family. Although it was said that Wei Ci was supporting them, he did not use his connections for favoritism. Instead, he let the clan choose many moldable talents, and after teaching them well, he recommended them to Her Majesty. As long as the imperial court had something to rely on, it was only a matter of time before the Wei family flourished. He did not touch anything else. The Wei clan had declined because of the war, but the clan's foundation was still there, and there were many talents. All they needed was an opportunity, and the Wei family would return to the ranks of the top aristocratic families. For a time, the Wei family was in the limelight. Wei Ci was recommending talents for the good of His Majesty. He had strictly monitored these talents, and they were able to withstand the test of great storms and waves. In the eyes of the other aristocratic families, this was not a good sign. Wasn't Wei Ci helping the Wei clan to nurture the power of his relatives? When His Majesty passed away, would he support a child with his bloodline to ascend the throne and control the court? On a more sinister note, it was not impossible to kill the young emperor and ascend to the throne himself. It was no wonder that not only were the aristocratic families involved in the matter of the meteorite, but there were also important ministers and confidants whom His Majesty trusted. From His Majesty's point of view, even the important ministers could not tolerate Wei Ci. Thinking of this, his back was drenched in cold sweat. His Majesty trusts you, let me trust you this once. Wei Zixiao, control your hand. Don't extend it too far. Otherwise, don't blame me for chopping it off. Others did not know Jiang Pengji's background, so they did not know that the meteorite warning did not work in front of her. But if it were another emperor, not only would Wei Ci die, but the entire Wei family would also be buried with him. When he thought of all this, Wei Ci's face became ghastly pale. While he was lost in thought, someone poked him between his eyebrows with a finger. Soon, a red mark appeared. Wei Ci's soul returned to his body, and he raised his hand to touch between his eyebrows. Have you come back to your senses? Jiang Pengji said calmly, anyway, everything is in the past. Don't repeat the same mistakes. Wei Ci's heart was filled with a myriad of emotions. He looked at Jiang Pengji with endless affection. Ci and the Wei family will never have any contact in this lifetime, Wei Ci said, if I go against this vow, I know. You don't have to swear. Jiang Pengji smiled. She said, as long as you remember it. Wei Ci could not help but swallow his unfinished words back into his stomach. Now that he looked back, he realized that many things could have been avoided, but he did not realize it because he was involved. As he spoke, the messenger outside came back with a report. Li Xiaowei requests to see the Lord. Han Mei is here? Quickly let him in. Jiang Pengji got up and returned to the main seat. She glanced at Wei Ci with some pity. In the military camp, every bit of time alone was precious. After a while, the tent curtain opened. The sound of armor rubbing against each other could be heard. Li Yun, dressed in silver armor, walked in. Greetings, my lord. Li Yun did not notice the strange atmosphere in the tent. He said, there are messengers from the northern borderline tribes 20 miles away from the camp. Messengers from the northern borderline tribes? Jiang Pengji's mood was much better. A faint smile hung on her face. Could it be that they are here to surrender? Li Yun praised, my lord's foresight is miraculous. They are indeed here to surrender. The scale of the tribes that surrendered this time was medium. There were about 8,000 young and strong men. The entire tribe had a population of 15,000. The total population of the northern borderline was small. If the nobles of the northern borderline knew that so many people had surrendered at once, they would be heartbroken. Thinking of this, Li Yun could not help but feel secretly pleased. Jiang Pengji frowned. She did not respond immediately. Instead, she said to Wei Ci, Zixiao, she called out. Wei Ci seemed to know what she was thinking. He got up and took the topographic map of the northern borderline. These maps were all important strategic resources. A small portion of them were secretly drawn by them. Most of them were plundered from the territories of the tribes that had contributed. Jiang Pengji opened a piece of parchment and carefully read the contents. Zixiao, something is not right. Jiang Pengji said, I can't tell what is wrong at the moment. Rather than saying that she had discovered something, it was better to say that her war instincts told her that things were not that simple. Did my lord discover anything? Jiang Pengji said, I'm not sure. Han Mei, go and settle those people down. I will personally meet their messengers. Li Yun received the order and left. Jiang Pengji looked at the parchment. Her eyes flickered slightly. After 2 hours, Li Yun brought the tribe's messengers to see Jiang Pengji. When the tribal chief appeared in the military tent, Jiang Pengji's gaze sized him up from head to toe. Jiang Pengji's attitude was indifferent. Her reaction was confusing. Chapter 996. If he led his people to surrender to the enemy, how would he feel? Li Yun was confused by the question and blurted out, that's impossible. His lord always liked to ask him hypothetical questions. Was he that unlucky? If it really came to that, he'd rather die in battle than wag his tail and beg for mercy from the enemy. Jiang Pengji laughed involuntarily and said gently, I'm just saying hypothetically. If it's true, how would you feel? Unwillingness, hatred, fear, but having no choice but to bear with it. Being subservient to the enemy and carefully trying to please them? Li Yun lowered his head and pondered, making guesses in a daze. Although he didn't have such experience, he could understand a little by simulating the situation. Jiang Pengji asked again, Han Mei is right, but think about it carefully. What was the reaction of the messenger and his followers? Li Yun said in surprise, reaction? Wasn't that a normal reaction? How was it normal? Jiang Pengji's eyes turned cold. She sneered and said, if he led his people to surrender to the enemy, and the enemy killed nearly 200,000 of his people, this hatred could be described as a blood feud. Even if he had to lower his head in order to survive, he wouldn't feel a sense of belonging and approval in his heart. But that person was different, his reaction and that of his followers were very interesting. Li Yun wanted to scratch his ears and cheeks. He didn't see any difference at all. Jiang Pengji said, one of his followers was trembling with fear. On the way here, he was so distracted that he stepped into a rabbit pit and fell, so his trousers were dyed with a few strands of white fur. His boots, trousers, and sleeves all had traces of mud. Although it was a simple pat, it still left traces. After entering the main tent, that person kept his head lowered and his shoulders shrunk, but his hands were tightly clamped to the sides of his body. On one hand, he was afraid of my fierce reputation in the northern borderline. On the other hand, he hated me, but he couldn't make a move. The follower's reaction was more normal and within a reasonable range. This follower showed hatred, but the other followers were timid. The fear in their hearts was greater than the hatred. On the other hand, the tribal messenger's reaction could be said to be interesting. Before meeting me, he ate roasted lamb, drank horse milk wine, and slept with beautiful women, so the smell on his body was a little strong. From this, it could be seen that the other party was in a rather relaxed mood. His attitude was very calm, and he did not have any of the emotions that Hami had mentioned. When he saw me, he seemed to be very respectful and fearful, but that kind of respect was too fake and perfunctory. No matter what, Jiang Pengji was someone who had climbed up from the bottom to the top. She was all too familiar with such perfunctory tactics. Li Yun hesitated for a moment, then said hesitantly, if it's just a perfunctory answer, it seems reasonable. Those who represented the tribe to surrender to Jiangpengji must be the higher-ups of the tribe who had a higher status. Even if he had no choice but to surrender to the enemy due to the situation, he still didn't approve of it in his heart. Therefore, perfunctory was still acceptable. Jiangpengji said, however, when a fearful follower and a fearless messenger are placed together, it doesn't make sense. Li Yun suddenly thought of something and a strange feeling flashed in his heart. My lord, you mean, they are pretending to surrender? If the people who came to surrender had nothing to fear, his lord would probably just beat them up and see what would happen on the battlefield. Surrender my ass without any sincerity. If the people who came to surrender were all trembling with fear, afraid that they would meet a new superior who would kill people like flies, this reaction was the most normal. To be honest, his lord's reputation in the north borderline was so fierce that it could stop children from crying at night. However, in reality, the leader of the messenger and his followers had completely different attitudes. The former ate meat, drank wine, and slept with women. How was it a humiliating surrender? What did this mean? It meant that there was something fishy going on. No matter what it was, they couldn't let their guard down. In a place like the battlefield, pretending to surrender has been tried and tested many times. Why is it impossible? Jiangpengji's eyes carried a hint of coldness. She said, but it's still too early to say this. First, send someone to secretly watch them. Once there's any abnormal movement, report back immediately. Don't alarm them. Li Yun accepted the order and retreated. Wei Ci, who was at the side, didn't leave. Instead, he looked at her with a strange gaze. Why are you looking at me like that? Jiangpengji walked forward and sat beside him. Can you see anything after looking at me for so long? Wei Ci smiled. Nothing, I just suddenly thought of something. Jiangpengji raised her eyebrows and chuckled. What's so fascinating about it? Ever since I met you, my lord, no one has been able to hide anything from you. Whether it was a fake surrender or other deceptive means, in Wei Ci's memory, it seemed that no one could hide anything from her. Was it because she was too vigilant, or had she never trusted anyone from the bottom of her heart? He was so worried about gains and losses in his previous life. Other than having a sensitive and thoughtful personality, another important reason was that he didn't feel much trust from Her Majesty. That feeling was hard to describe, but he really felt that there was an insurmountable gap between him and Her Majesty. If people in his previous life knew about this, they would definitely say that he was talking nonsense. How could Her Majesty be suspicious? If Her Majesty was suspicious, how could she tolerate Wei Ci? When a meteorite fell from the sky, which person in power wouldn't have the intention to kill? Her Majesty chose to go easy and did not pursue Wei Ci's family. Could this be called suspicious? Wei Ci didn't agree with this statement. Being suspicious was not the same as not trusting. Her Majesty wasn't a suspicious person, but she really didn't trust anyone. In the past, he would rather keep this to himself than say it out loud, but now he wanted to clarify things. Jiangpengji said narcissistically, "That's because I'm wise and powerful. Any deception is futile in my eyes." Wei Ci asked in return, "My lord, do you really think so?" "In my opinion, I'm afraid that my lord doesn't trust anyone." "Zixiao, what's wrong with you?" Jiangpengji said, "Even if I don't trust others, it's impossible for me to not trust Zixiao." Wei Ci pursed his lips and said, "If that's the case, why did my lord even?" Jiangpengji's expression froze. "Even what?" Wei Ci hesitated for a while and wrote a word on her palm with his finger. He lowered his voice and said, "You don't even trust this person." If even that person wasn't worthy of his lord's trust, Wei Ci didn't know who else in this world was qualified to do so. "Zixiao, I'm very happy that you were able to get the answer," Jiangpengji said. Jiangpengji said, "I know where you come from. Based on your intelligence, you probably suspect my identity." Why don't I trust people? It's only because they aren't worthy of my trust. Do you understand? Because she knew the truth and saw through it, any obstacles were useless in front of her. Wei Xi looked at Jiang Pengji with a complicated gaze. It was a little unfamiliar, but more of a bone-deep familiarity. Chapter 997. Huh. Looks like Lu Shi isn't as amazing as the rumors say. The tribal emissary was in a good mood after completing his mission of surrendering. As soon as he returned to a safe place, he revealed his original appearance. Don't let your guard down. Those who underestimate Lu Shi won't have a good ending, his companion warned him. The tribal emissary lay on the animal skin chair and enjoyed the massage of the beauty's shoulders. What are you afraid of? He asked. If Lu Shi suspects us, will she give us an independent campsite? Having an independent campsite was like a child having his own room and private space. He wouldn't have to be afraid of his parents when he did something. Even so, there's a saying in the Han family of the Central Plains. It's better to be safe than sorry. We can't let our guard down until the last moment. Compared to the tribal emissary's arrogance, this person was quite calm. The tribal emissary said, Fine, fine, fine. You don't have much knowledge, but you're good at writing. I'm afraid of you. Now we're surrounded by our own people. Lu Shi doesn't have clairvoyance and hearing. How can she hear our whispers from afar? She's so timid. His companion showed some disapproval on his face, but because the other's position was higher than his, he could only swallow his anger. Don't worry about this and that. Just do your job well. The tribal emissary sat boldly and said, You're right. Lu Shi is stupid, but there are many evil people under her. We've just surrendered, so we can't let them get hold of us. Lu Shi's spies might sneak in these few days. You better control your people so that they don't get exposed and ruin the acting king's plan. It was easy to spoil things if there were too many people. Therefore, only a few key people knew about the fake surrender. Hearing that the tribe chose to surrender to Jiang Pengji without even fighting, many warriors were depressed. Some were even worried about their future. The overall morale was very low, but they knew it was necessary. If everyone knew about the fake surrender, who could guarantee that everyone would keep their mouths shut? Wouldn't it be a bad thing if they talked in their sleep? With these thoughts in mind, they behaved obediently and did not cause any trouble, as if they had truly pledged their allegiance. However, as Jiang Pengji had said, it was fake. No matter how much they tried to mystify it, it would never be real. No matter how they acted, in Jiang Pengji's eyes, they were here to pretend to surrender. They could not win her trust at all. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. It was the hottest season of the year. The north borderline planned to attack from two fronts at the same time. On the one hand, they would use trickery to subdue Jiang Pengji, and on the other hand, they would plant bombs in her rear line of defense. The fake surrender had been arranged, and the defense of the rear had also been put on the agenda. Lu Zhao had been a little worried recently. He wished that he could go out for cockfights and walks every day. He didn't want to go home either. Aunt Dai, elder sister, is still fighting at the front lines. My marriage is not urgent. Lu Zhao sneakily climbed over the wall to get home. Standing under the wall was a familiar figure. He was so scared that his legs turned to jelly and he almost fell. No rush? Aunt Dai looked him up and down and pretended to be angry. At your age, you should be engaged. Why are you not in a hurry? A few months ago, Aunt Dai had brought her servants and rushed to Chongzhou with only one goal. To get engaged to Lu Zhao. When he was young, his legal wife and official mother were bedridden. Aunt Dai was in charge of the household. Fortunately, Aunt Dai did not purposely torment the sons and daughters of the concubines in the backyard, so Lu Zhao could live a comfortable life. Although Aunt Dai was arrogant and treated people coldly, Lu Xiao admired her when he thought about the situation of other sons of the concubines. It was one thing to be admired and respected, but it was another thing to be forced to get engaged. "Aunt, I'm still young. I haven't had enough fun." Lu Xiao was not against getting engaged, but he did not want to get engaged at this juncture. Before he could finish speaking, concubine Dai looked at him with a cold and sinister look. Lu Xiao felt a chill down his spine. He forgot what he was going to say. "Haven't had enough fun? You can still have fun if you're engaged. You're all grown up. You can't be willful," Aunt Dai said. "Lu Xiao." Before she finished speaking, a familiar voice came from behind. "The child is still young. Why are you forcing him?" Lu Shi was dressed casually. He looked like he was taking a stroll after a meal. He walked forward and looked at his concubine and son of the concubine. He said coldly, "If Xiao is useless, then so be it. I can't count on him." Lu Xiao and Aunt Dai's expressions changed, but their expressions were slightly different. The former was slightly hurt, while the latter seemed to be enduring something. After a while, Aunt Dai said in a tone that left no room for negotiation, "What if I insist on forcing him? Cousin, are you going to stop me?" Lu Shi glanced at Lu Xiao and sighed. "The older you get, the more your temperament." "More what?" Aunt Dai raised her eyebrows. Her face was filled with genuine anger. "I said I want Lu Xiao to get engaged as soon as possible." Lu Shi's gaze froze. He met Aunt Dai's eyes. In the end, he was defeated. "Okay, I'll let you decide. Xiao, don't disobey your stepmother." Aunt Dai's face twitched when she heard Lu Shi's words. Stepmother? Even after so many years, she still couldn't get used to being called that. Lu Shi left. Lu Xiao couldn't resist Aunt Dai's thick thighs. He could only accept his fate and submit to reality. "Choose, which one you want." Aunt Dai sat in front of Lu Xiao. The table was filled with information about various young girls. Lu Xiao's face was bitter. He looked at Aunt Dai's burning gaze and chose. "Do you think I'm trying to harm you?" Lu Xiao shook his head. "I wouldn't dare." "That's good. Anyone would harm you, but I wouldn't." Aunt Dai seemed to remember something. A trace of reminiscence flashed in her eyes, but she didn't indulge in it. She quickly came back to her senses. "No matter what happens in the future, don't think about things that don't belong to you. Don't listen to others. That will bring you disaster. You are your mother's only remaining child. You are her only obsession before she died. If you're gone, how sad will she be when she finds out? Be smart and don't be used by others." "Used by others? By who?" Lu Xiao's expression didn't change, but his mind turned. "I promised your mother that I would protect you. You can't do anything to disappoint her. Do you understand?" Lu Xiao's heart was filled with an indescribable emotion. Aunt Dai said, "Hurry up and choose. Don't waste time." Lu Xiao said, "What are you worried about, Aunt Dai?" "I'm worried that you'll be played to death by those two. Even your mother can't beat them. Who do you think you are?" Aunt Dai gritted her teeth. "Get engaged as soon as possible. When you have children, at least leave a bloodline for your mother. When that time comes, you can die however you want. I don't care. Others don't know, but how can I not know? Do you think they can't see through you if you hide it well? This guy couldn't even beat his mother. Who was he trying to fool? Aunt Dai, are you misunderstanding something?" Lu Xiao asked her in a low voice. Chapter 998. Lu Xiao looked at concubine Dai in silence. When he looked at others seriously, they would notice that his eyes were very similar to Jiangpengji's. "Concubine." Lu Xiao lowered his voice and said in a serious tone, I know what I'm doing, what do you know? Concubine Dai seemed to be triggered by something. Her hands uncontrollably squeezed Lu Xiao's shoulders. Her expression was so agitated that it was hard to suppress it. It looked a little twisted. Your mother also said that she knew what she was doing. What happened to her in the end? She died. The person who had taught her how to manage the rice and how to brew pear blossom wine with a smile the day before had died suddenly the next day. Concubine Dai wanted to scream, but she was still rational and forced herself to hold it in. Lu Xiao felt as if his shoulders were being clamped by a pair of pliers. He was in so much pain that tears were coming out, but he stubbornly did not make a sound. Concubine Dai held it in and forced herself to calm down. Look at your reaction. You must have found out the truth from some channel, right? Lu Xiao hesitated and nodded after a while. That person told me. Concubine Dai handed me the brocade box. I followed the instructions in the box and found Mother's belongings. I also found Mother's handwriting among her belongings. Before Lu Xiao came to Chongzhou, Concubine Dai, who usually ignored people, visited him in the middle of the night. It almost scared him to the point of wetting his pants. She did not say anything unnecessary. Instead, she handed him a delicate brocade box and said that it was his mother's belongings. Look at it secretly. No matter what is inside, you must keep your mouth shut. No one can tell. That was what Concubine Dai had told him. Lu Xiao was suspicious, but he could not resist the temptation of curiosity. He finally opened the brocade box quietly. There was a strange-looking key and a neatly folded piece of paper with yellowed edges. A map was drawn on the paper. Lu Xiao avoided everyone and sneaked to the place indicated on the map. He found a treasure that was enough for a normal person to live a comfortable life. However, the gold and silver were not important. What was important was the belongings left behind by his birth mother. Ever since Lu Xiao had memories, he had always thought that he was the lowliest son of a concubine. His mother was lowly and his father treated him coldly. It was already a miracle that he could make a living in the Lu residence. However, the relic of his birth mother had subverted his previous understanding. Don't believe that bastard's words. Concubine Dai said decisively. Don't believe anything that man says. If you really can't make a decision, you can trust Lanting. Trust Lanting. Even if you are ignorant and incompetent, you will at least be a carefree prince in the future. Lu Xiao's face turned red. He really hadn't thought that far ahead. He was used to being a coward and was used to living a comfortable life. He only wanted to set up a trap to protect the people he wanted to protect. That's what Mother wrote in her diary. Sister is absolutely trustworthy. Lu Xiao seemed to have thought of something and added, and you. When Concubine Dai heard this, she was stunned. Her beautiful face was filled with sorrow and her eyes seemed to be weeping silently. Did she really say that? Under Concubine Dai's passionate gaze, Lu Xiao nodded with difficulty. Yes, that's what Mother said. Humph, at least she has a conscience. Concubine Dai snorted lightly, but the corners of her mouth could not help but rise slightly. I just don't understand. Why does Concubine Dai want me to get married as soon as possible? Lu Xiao was still depressed when he thought about it. He was being forced to get married. He was speechless. Get married as soon as possible and leave the family as soon as possible. Concubine Dai said, no matter where your sister comes from, do you think she really loves you as a brother? Do you think Lu Shi loves you so much? If you are too much of an eyesore, Lu Shi's men can kill you. Lu Xiao swallowed nervously, feeling a chill on his neck. Concubine Dai was right. If he stood in his sister's way, even if she did not do anything, her men might secretly do it. He did not have that many lives to hide from the schemes of those shrewd people. Separating from the family is not a long-term solution. Concubine Dai sneered and pointed at the pile of information on young girls on the table. The girls I chose for you have good looks and good figures, but their families are not that good. Without a strong family, Lu Xiao's appearance was so weak that he would not be eye-catching. Lu Xiao took a closer look. It was true. The girls in the pictures were beautiful, but their families were not that good. Concubine Dai, we should wait for my sister to come back and make the decision. Let her help us choose. Lu Xiao still insisted on his own opinion. Concubine Dai had just calmed down, but Lu Xiao hurriedly comforted her. He raised his hand and held Concubine Dai's wrist. Concubine Dai, if what my mother wrote in her handwritten notes is true, I think you may have misunderstood something. I am not greedy for power, nor do I covet my sister's future. I did not put in a good word for that person. I only believe in my own judgment and try my best to fulfill my mother's last wish. What was her last wish? What do you think? Lu Xiao asked. Concubine Dai's beautiful cheeks were covered with frost, and her eyes were full of murderous intent. Lu Xiao felt that his neck was about to freeze. She was killed by someone, but she still refused to forget that person. I compromised and married him. Why didn't she look at me? Lu Xiao was speechless. No, there was too much information in this sentence. Lu Xiao, remember, you can't win against those two people. When Concubine Dai said this, her eyes flashed with fear. What, two souls in one body? I don't believe it at all. That was clearly a lonely ghost of unknown origin. As for the other person, Lu Xiao patted Concubine Dai's shoulder to calm her restless emotions. He opened his dark and pure eyes and said softly, Concubine Dai, I know. But it seems that there are some things that only I can do. Lu Xiao was not a stupid person. Since he knew the social status of a concubine, he knew how to hide his abilities. He could learn the things that the teacher taught him only once, but he still pretended that it was difficult and insisted on learning it more than 10 times. Because he could not steal his brother Lu Shi's limelight. Well, in the end, it was confirmed that it was his sister. After all, if a concubine wanted to live a good life, he must not be better than a legitimate son. At such a young age, no one taught Lu Xiao these things, but he learned it without a teacher, which showed how smart he was. But there was something that he must not know. If one pretended to be a pig to eat the tiger for too long, he would sooner or later become a pig. Lu Xiao pretended to be a bad student, and after a while, he became like a pig. It was good to be a bad student, and he did not have to care about eating, drinking and playing. Coincidentally, his sister, who came back from the dead, was an all-rounder, and in the future, she would be the ruler of the world. Who could be more powerful than him? Not to mention that Lu Xiao was heartless and did not care about his sister's kindness. He had not met his sister many times, and they did not even talk much. How could they talk about feelings? What can you do? Concubine Dai sneered, even if you don't hide your abilities, who can you beat? Lu Xiao, he could not beat anyone, so there was no need to remind him of such a sad reality again and again. No, Concubine Dai, Lu Xiao looked around and waved at her. The two whispered, I suspect that person is fake. Fake? Concubine Dai opened her eyes wide in shock. Chapter 999. After much persuasion, Concubine Dai was sent away. Lu Xiao, who had a headache from being urged to marry, let out a long sigh of relief. However, he was only happy for 2 days before another matter came to him. This time, it was a little tricky. This had to start with Lu Xiao's gang of scoundrels. As a young master with 2 thick legs, Lu Xiao, the son of a concubine, was very popular in Chongzhou. Whenever there was something fun or delicious, people would remember him. He was like a flower at a banquet. Wherever there was good wine and food, he would be there. On this day, he went out as usual. The person who sent the invitation was a member of an aristocratic family in Chongzhou. It was from his sister's faction. Lu Xiao naturally had to give face. Not only did he have to go, he had to dress up before going. He was dressed neatly from head to toe. Jade pendants hung from his waist. Silk and satin were fragrant. He took his favorite fan and wore an exquisite jade crown. Like a butterfly, he flew out. Just as he arrived, Lu Xiao was surrounded by people. Now, the playboys of Chongzhou followed his lead. So what if he was a son of a concubine? Lu Xiao knew that his status as a son of a concubine was something that many legitimate sons could not even catch up to. Many people talked to him. Even if they were cursing in their hearts, they still had to say nice things and compliment him. These were the beautiful days of having two thick legs. Lu Xiao took a seat at the banquet. A few of his friends came forward to chat with him. The few of them chatted and laughed. As they spoke, a string of bamboo instruments sounded. A row of scantily dressed beauties with veils on their heads walked in amidst the fluttering flower petals. Each of them was filled with the charm of the western region. They were slender, with a voluptuous figure. The old scholar would definitely say that it was immoral, but to this group of playful young masters, it was a sight that they could not miss. They had to see. The gang of scoundrels smiled and suggested, "Brother Xiao, if you like, I will send one to your room." Lu Xiao's infatuated gaze regained clarity. He said indecently, "That won't do. My father and sister are watching me closely. I can't mess around with women at such a young age. If I accidentally leak my young energy on a woman, they will beat me to death. My life is more important. I can't repay a beauty's kindness." The gang of scoundrels laughed and did not speak. Everyone continued to eat, drink, and have fun. Lu Xiao also drank a lot of sake. With the help of a maid, he went to the wing room where he often rested. As soon as he laid down, his hand felt a warm and delicate skin. He was so shocked that he was sober. He rolled over and lifted the quilt. It would have been better if he hadn't opened it, but once he did, his expression changed. He saw a naked woman lying on the bed. Her honey-colored skin was smooth and supple. Even though it was just a glance, Zhang Xian could tell how good the other party's figure was. The areas that should be plump were not reduced at all, and the areas that should be thin did not have any excess fat. That soft waist was thin and flat. Do not look at indecent things. Don't look. Lu Xiao covered his eyes with one hand and waved the other at the woman. Get out of here. Who allowed you to lie here? Put on your clothes and leave this place as soon as possible. Old witch, do you want to eat the cradle? Lu Xiao was 4 years younger than Jiang Pengji. He was only 15 or 16 years old. He was still young and wanted to develop quietly. He was determined not to act recklessly. The woman was about to strike a seductive pose, but when she heard Lu Xiao's words, her pretty face darkened. She got up from the bed. Lu Xiao secretly heaved a sigh of relief. However, before he could completely relax, an unfamiliar warmth wrapped around him like a water snake and coiled around his neck. The fragrance from the woman's body rushed to his nose. Lu Xiao was so shocked that he raised his hand and pushed her away. Don't you have any shame? Lu Xiao said, I asked you to leave, so leave. Lu Xiao did not show it on his face, but he was suspicious in his heart. He understood his gang of scoundrels. Those people would not go against his wishes. Unless, Lu Xiao's heart turned cold, but he did not show it on his face. The naked woman laughed coquettishly and tried to move forward. Lu Xiao dodged twice and was shamefully pressed down on the bed by the woman. When it was time to use books, one would regret not having enough. One would not know the difficulties without experiencing it. Nonsense. What's the use of reading? If he had learned more riding and archery and trained his body, he would not have been unable to free himself from a woman. Slow down. Don't take off my clothes. Are you a woman? Lu Xiao struggled desperately. The woman laughed. Are you a man? If other people had such a beautiful woman throwing herself at them, they would have been entangled with her. Why did this guy look like he was about to cry? She was stunned for a moment. Lu Xiao immediately found an opportunity to push her away and yelled outside. Help! Someone is molesting me. His cry for help was useful. Finally, someone heard the commotion and rushed in to rescue Lu Xiao, who was in a sorry state. Everyone was speechless. Who was molesting who? Lu Xiao's cowardly look made everyone speechless. How could he not take advantage of a woman who was sent to his door? Could it be that Lu Xiao's upbringing was really so strict that Lu Xi and Lu Xi both restrained him so that he could maintain his chastity? Lu Xiao secretly heaved a sigh of relief. How could a beauty's kindness be so easy to bear? Investigate. Find out who sent this woman. Lu Xiao's face was red with anger. His hands trembled as he tidied up his clothes. It was obvious that he was really angry. Everyone looked at each other in disinterest. He was only sleeping with a woman, but he made it sound like he was being slept with. He hadn't even slept with her yet. Lu Xiao didn't care. The woman was detained for questioning. His followers had already begun to investigate. The final result made Lu Xiao's heart turn cold. On the surface, the woman was a dancer kept by the aristocrats of Chongzhou. To put it nicely, she was a dancer. To put it bluntly, she was a tool for sexual intercourse. When he had nothing to do, he would dance for his master and warm his bed for his master. After a deeper investigation, the woman's background made Lu Xiao wary. This woman was originally kept by the aristocrats of Chongzhou. Unfortunately, that aristocrat was a chicken that was killed by his sister as a warning to others. Excluding this layer of relationship, the woman also had connections with the north borderline. He had to be wary of this. Lu Xiao was deep in thought. The gang of scoundrels beside him said, "Brother Xiao, it's just a woman. It's not necessary." Lu Xiao said, "Why not? There's something wrong with this woman's identity." The gang of scoundrels jumped in shock. Is there a problem? I bought it especially for you." He had wanted to use it to please Lu Xiao. He didn't expect to fail and hit the horse's leg. If he had known that Lu Xiao didn't like women, he would have looked for a man. Lu Xiao came happily and left angrily. Before he left, he even took the woman with him. "Tell me. Who sent you?" Lu Xiao asked. The woman blinked and asked flirtatiously, "Didn't I ask just now? Tell me the truth. Do you think you can hide this from me?" Lu Xiao thought of the scene in the room. He was so angry that his liver trembled. He was a man, but he was almost raped by a woman on the spot. Which dancer has such great strength and learned such profound martial arts? If not, he wouldn't have to beg for help. Chapter 1000. Tell me, who are you? Lu Xiao lifted the woman's chin with his folding fan. I don't have much patience. If you don't tell me the truth, I have many ways to make you talk. Do you really think that I, Lu Xiao, am too weak to touch a woman? Because Lu Xiao used a bit too much force, a red mark was left on the woman's chin. She didn't get angry. She looked around and rolled her eyes. Even though she was a prisoner, she still winked at Lu Xiao. Do you really want to know? The woman smiled. It seems that Lu Sanlang isn't as ignorant and incompetent as the rumors say. At this point, a hint of surprise and undisguised admiration flashed through the woman's eyes. If you dare to talk, I dare to listen. Lu Xiao was secretly scared. He raised his hand and put away his precious folding fan. In his mind, He wanted to go back and have his servants clean it to prevent it from getting dirty. The woman smiled. I suddenly don't want to talk anymore. I want to see what means you can use to make me talk. Although she was tied up, she was very close to Lu Xiao. Her body softened and she fell into his arms. Her elbows, which were tied behind her back, slightly bent and rubbed against Lu Xiao's chest. Then, she coquettishly said. Like a weak water snake, she twisted closer and rubbed against a certain bulge. Lu Xiao didn't react at first. He thought that the woman was going to kill him. When the woman rubbed against him with her full buttocks, the young man who didn't know what was going on instantly blushed. He slapped her face to the side with his fan and shouted angrily, You woman, do you have any shame? I've never seen anyone more promiscuous than you in my life. The woman was stunned by Lu Xiao's slap. Her beautiful face twisted for a moment. However, she was very patient and changed her strategy in an instant. She let out a soft moan, and her voice was full of twists and turns. Lang Jun, you made me feel so good. Again, Lu Xiao's face turned red and green. The woman's shamelessness was far beyond his imagination. Do you really think that I don't hit women? Lu Xiao saw that the other party was wriggling towards him and quickly lifted his leg to kick him away. He dodged and said, If you continue like this, I'll immediately send someone to tie you up and send you to my sister. I can even use you to reward the soldiers. The woman's face changed when she heard this. The smile on her face disappeared. Lu San Lang, you're such a coward. The woman struggled to sit up. Most of the thin clothes she was wrapped in had fallen off due to the struggle just now, revealing a large area of her white flesh. She didn't mind her appearance and instead looked at Lu Xiao with a sneer. Lu, she is just a woman. In the end, she will still have to marry. The Lu family business will be inherited by you in the end. Are you willing to submit to others? He was bullied by a prostitute outside, and this person actually wanted to pack up the trouble and let his elder sister deal with it. Could he be more useless? Lu Xiao found a safe distance to ensure that the other party wouldn't pounce on him. Only then did he slowly calm down. Why would I not? Lu Xiao squinted. His black eyes flashed with a hint of fierceness. The woman in front of him must have been ordered to instigate him and his sister. He thought for a moment and smiled. Do you know how much my monthly salary is? Do you know how much the brocade satin, the fragrant pouch, the agate bracelet, and all these miscellaneous things are worth? The woman was confused by Lu Xiao's unreasonable answer. The cheapest one. If you use your body to earn money, you can earn it for at least 3 to 5 years, right? Lu Xiao smiled wickedly. The woman's face suddenly turned pale. He continued, I don't need to do anything. As long as I live a simple life, my identity can bring me endless wealth and a superior status. Why should I give up a good life and be stupid enough to fight for power with my sister? The woman widened her eyes in shock. This was completely different from the script. It's not that I want to criticize you, but you think too highly of me. The only advantage I have over my sister is that I have more meat. Lu Xiao pointed at the spot a few inches below her navel with her slender fingers, which were obviously from a pampered lifestyle. That sister of mine, she's really ruthless when she wants to be ruthless. Believe me, if she really wants to cripple me, maybe I'll have to bear the pain of separating my flesh from me. Although Jiang Pengji didn't act too tough and ruthless in front of Lu Xiao, he wasn't stupid. How could he not guess? Under the woman's shocked gaze, Lu Xiao continued, I think you have some misunderstandings about the Han culture. There's nothing wrong with a man inheriting the family business, but it doesn't mean that a dominant daughter doesn't have the right to inherit. Have you heard of marrying into the family? Not to mention that I'm a bastard, even if I'm a legitimate son, it's easy for my sister to kill me quietly. No matter who the master behind you is, I can only say that his brain isn't good. Why don't you instigate my father to fight with my sister? Why don't you go to heaven? How much respect do you have for him to fight with a ruthless sister with his tonnage? The woman was stunned by Lu Xiao's words. She couldn't wrap her head around it for a while. Her face darkened. Are you really willing? Lu Xiao snorted. He said, I'm willing. I'm willing. She was afraid that he wouldn't even have the chance to be willing in the end. The woman was angered by Lu Xiao. She said angrily, coward. Riches come from danger. The youth in front of her was useless to the extreme. Lu Xiao raised his eyebrows. Continue scolding. If you haven't studied much, can't recognize a few words, and don't have much knowledge, I can still help you. The woman almost crushed her pearly white teeth. She had never seen a useless person who was more cowardly and useless than Lu Xiao. He was determined to be useless and no one could help him up. How could such a Lu Xiao make him and Lu Shi fall out? The woman's mind spun a few times. No one knew what she was thinking. A trace of malice flashed in Lu Xiao's eyes. He said, Sister is too far away. Why don't I hand you over to my father? Lu Xiao was a man of his word. When he got home, he threw the woman to Lu Shi, who was unemployed at home. This woman is trying to sow discord between you and Lanting? Lu Shi frowned. A trace of disgust flashed in his eyes. Lu Xiao said, this person has evil intentions. We can't let her go easily. Sister is in danger in the Beijiang. We can't let these people take advantage of her. You're right, Lu Shi said. Lanting is open-minded, but no matter how good your relationship is, it can't withstand suspicion. If these people ruin your relationship with Lanting, they won't be able to pay for it even if they die a few times. Leave this matter to me. You can go now. Before Lu Xiao left, he asked, Father, how do you plan to deal with this woman? Lu Shi said, break her limbs and twist her tongue. Throw her on the street. Since there was a plan to sow discord, the person behind it must be paying attention to the woman's movements. They could use this opportunity to find the person behind it. Chapter 1001. Watching Lu Xiao's figure disappear into the distance, Lu Shi let out a slight sigh. Lu Shi turned to look at the woman and saw her affectionate eyes. A wave of disgust surged in his heart. Someone, take her, Lu Shi frowned before he could finish his sentence. His body swayed and he had to support himself with one hand on the table to keep himself from falling. After a long while, Lu Shi's tightly furrowed brows relaxed slightly, but there was a hint of gloominess between his brows. The servant didn't hear the order, so he reminded him. Master? Lu Shi glanced at the woman with disgust and said coldly, skin her and throw her anywhere. The woman was so scared that she fell to the ground. He had only broken her limbs and twisted her tongue, but now he wanted to skin her alive? Lu Shi rubbed his eyebrows and put one hand behind his back. He was about to get up and go to the back hall. He suddenly thought of something and said, by the way, remember to dig her eyes out first. Dig her eyes out? The woman's eyes widened in fear. She struggled violently, but she was tied up. How could she break free? When Lu Xiao knew what would happen to the woman, he still shivered even though he was mentally prepared. I have to write a letter to my sister and explain what happened. Lu Xiao was so scared that his hand was shaking. He felt like he was the most normal person in the family. His father looked gentle but he was ruthless. His sister looked bright but she killed people like flies. He was the only one who was terrified. Concubine Dai came to see him. She sneered at his reaction. Now you know how to be afraid? If he followed her plan, Lu Xiao could find an excuse to leave the family. He didn't need to be afraid. How could a mortal like him interfere in a fight between gods? Lu Xiao smiled bitterly. I'm afraid, but there are some things I have to do. He mailed the letter he had written. Lu Xiao would rather be an ordinary son of a concubine. It was better to eat and drink and wait for death than to live in fear. Before his letter reached Jiangpengji, the war in the northern borderline had completely tilted in her favor. After the Battle of Yishui, the northern borderline faced another huge defeat. This failure started from the overly optimistic layout of the northern borderline. Jiangpengji sent people to keep a close eye on the newly surrendered tribes. As expected, she found many strange things. She could basically confirm that they had pretended to surrender. When Li Yun found out the truth, he clenched his fists in anger and took the initiative to volunteer. If he didn't beat up these sons of bitches so badly that even their grandmother wouldn't recognize them, he, Li Yun, would write his name backwards. Fu Wang was rather tempted. He had been holding back a little too much recently. As a general, if he couldn't wantonly fight and kill, how would he be any different from a salted fish that had lost his dreams? Looking around, he saw that the military advisors were calm and collected, so Fu Wang chose to endure and not make a move. It was the job of the strategists to come up with strategies. Even without his request, these black-hearted fellows would not let the enemy have an easy time. Do you have any countermeasures? Jiangpengji asked Feng Zhen and the others for their opinions. Qiguan Rang suggested, why don't we beat him at his own game? In this situation, it was a good idea to beat them at their own game. The enemy was full of joy when they came to launch a sneak attack, but instead fell into their trap. How wonderful! Feng Zhen frowned and said disapprovingly, if they choose to attack at night, it would be a good idea to beat them at their own game. We can set up an ambush in advance. But what if they choose to daydream? When we were fighting with the northern borderline army, they suddenly stabbed us in the back. The situation was already chaotic. The northern border's cowards who pretended to surrender rose up from the rear. Our main force could not take care of both the front and the rear. Zishir's worries are not without reason. Qiguan Rang thought for a moment and said, the north borderline has launched several night raids, but they have not been able to gain any advantage over our army. Instead, they have been defeated time and time again. After learning these lessons, they will be more careful when they want to launch a night attack. They won't dare to try it easily. If that was the case, they would have to be careful. If they were careless and failed miserably in an easy task, the drop in morale was secondary. What they were afraid of was a counterattack from the northern borderline. If they succeeded in their counterattack, their efforts in the first half of the year would be for naught. When dealing with tough bones like the northern borderline, if they were not crippled in one go, they would not truly be docile. Sun Wen lowered his eyes. He seemed to have thought of something and his lips curled into a cold smile. My lord, I have a plan that can ensure our safety. Jiangpengji said, tell me in detail. Sun Wen stepped forward and bowed. He said, everyone in the tribe is a captive. Naturally, they are part of our army. They should be contributing to our army. None of the people present were stupid. Even if Sun Wen only said half of it, they could guess the other half smoothly. Sun Wen was planning to push the tribes who pretended to surrender to the front line as scapegoats. Jiangpengji was still streaming at the moment. The audience also participated in the discussion with great enthusiasm. They always had the illusion that they were the counselors of a feudal lord, giving instructions and commanding the country with great vigor. Strawberry yogurt, this is not good. Let the enemies who pretended to surrender be our vanguard. It will be more convenient for them to steal military secrets. Mingtianliugang, Sun Wen is a ruthless person. With a few words, he can make his enemies kill each other. We can't afford to offend him. Aloe flavor yogurt, if we let the enemy be the vanguard, our troop movements will be under the enemy's nose. Lo Siji Lianmeng, you can't say that. In ancient society, the transmission of information is very slow, and there is a strong lag. Letting the tribes who pretended to surrender be the vanguard will indeed expose our military movements, but we can use them to send the wrong message to the enemy. Who said that war was as simple as killing people? There were many twists and turns in it, and the complexity was more complicated than the fights in the palace. Since ancient times, which famous general who could fight a war was a fool? There were more and more holes in their minds. Sun Wen's intention was the same as the audience, Lao Siji Lianmeng, to deliberately mislead the enemy with false information. This is a good plan. If it is used properly, we can turn the tables and let the north borderline be led by the nose by us. Jiang Pengji's knitted brows relaxed slightly, and her mood improved a little. However, how to mislead the enemy and how to set up a trap for the enemies who pretended to surrender and their own people to fight each other was still something they needed to discuss slowly. The military meeting went on for more than 2 hours. Until every detail was considered, Jiang Pengji let everyone disperse. At the same time, the north borderline was also having an intense discussion. However, they were not discussing the battle plan and details. They were simply arguing about who should get the honors. They did not hear wrongly. They were competing for a good opportunity to render meritorious service. The third prince listened to the whole process quietly. He was so angry that his heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys were hurting. The war had not started yet, and these idiots already thought that they had a chance to win. It was as if they could send a pig to hold the line and win for sure. Who gave them this courage? Even if his teacher was still alive, he did not dare to say that his plan would definitely achieve the desired results. I don't want to listen anymore. If I continue to listen, I will die of anger. The third prince casually found an excuse to leave the big tent. His brothers were still immersed in the imagination of the future. The first prince followed him out. Why? You have no confidence in them? Chapter 1002. Has Lu Shi gone mad or stupid? The envoy who was in charge of pretending to surrender rubbed his hands excitedly and paced back and forth in the tent. His face was full of uncontrollable excitement. I just went over to show my loyalty and deliberately confuse her. She's actually stupid enough to put us in an important position? The smile on the envoy's face could not be suppressed. It almost reached the back of his ears. In order to win Jiang Pengji's trust and lower their guard, the envoy from the northern borderline had to show his loyalty when he saw Jiang Pengji. He never thought that the other party would really dare to use the troops who had just surrendered. Ha ha ha, Lu Shi even said, don't suspect the people you use and don't use the people you doubt. What a joke. The envoy from the northern borderline had a hazy and stern look in his eyes. When he thought of the war and casualties that Jiang Pengji had brought to the northern borderline, he wanted to tear this woman apart and eat her alive. Are the people of the Central Plains so naive? But naivety is naivety. It's convenient for us to go to the front line. For the northern borderline, Jiang Pengji, who had brought them huge casualties, was a devil and executioner who killed without batting an eye. His companions' ears grew calluses from listening to him. He said impatiently, "You've repeated the same words several times. Lu Shi might not have good intentions in sending us to the front line. Isn't he just using us to charge and break through the enemy lines for him? We're sacrificing our lives for nothing. If they went to the front line, the enemy would be their people. What was there to be happy about?" The envoy from the northern borderline put on a stern face and showed an expression of exasperation. You're really stupid. Why can't you think positively? What does it mean for us to be the vanguard? It means that Lu Shi's battle deployment can't be hidden from our eyes. We'll inform the imperial court and work together. No matter what tricks Lu Shi has, he won't be able to escape. As for being used by Jiang Pengji to kill each other, compared to the overall situation, this sacrifice was nothing. A man had to learn to make choices and not be constrained by petty gains. His companion sneered and said, I don't know about other things, but I know that Lu Shi is a sinister and cunning person. How can he easily trust the enemy who has just surrendered? Maybe there's a trap waiting for a fool like you to jump into it. The face of the northern borderline tribe emissary darkened. This person was always going against him. The more he looked at him, the more he disliked him. Humph, he snorted heavily and said darkly, since that's the case, don't regret it when you make a great contribution in the future. His companion felt extremely aggrieved. He suspected that Jiang Pengji had other plans, but it didn't mean that he didn't want to share the credit. The northern borderline tribe emissary continued. Besides, we have no choice but to agree to this. I have pledged my loyalty to Lu Shi. Now that he has asked us to go to the front lines, do you think I can find an excuse to refuse? Once he declined, the other party would become suspicious even if he didn't. You don't have to worry too much. If Lu Shi really knew that we were faking our surrender, she would have already sent troops to encircle and annihilate us. Why would she put us in an important position? When the accomplice heard this, he felt that it made sense. They did not have the initiative in this matter. If Jiang Pengji wanted to scheme against them, they could only take it one step at a time. We will inform the acting king of the imperial court of this matter and try to reduce casualties. The accomplice was loyal to the northern borderline. When he thought of killing his own people on the battlefield, he felt upset. Although we have to put on a show for Lu Shi, we can't go overboard. The northern borderline tribe emissary wanted to claim credit, so how could he listen to his words? Not only that, but he also felt that his companion was too timid and soft-hearted. They could only get access to real military secrets if they completely won Lu Shi's trust. If she became suspicious or discovered something, not only would they have to die, but even the people they brought along would have to die with them. If this matter was successful, the benefits would be unimaginable to them. Wealth came from danger. Little did they know that their little tricks were all within Jiang Pengji's expectations. It was still unknown who would emerge victorious. The acting king of the northern borderline had been replaced by the sixth prince. When he saw the secret report that the northern borderline tribe emissary secretly passed to him, he was so happy that he slapped the table and stood up. The heavens want our northern borderline to prosper. The sixth prince was overjoyed. He summoned his maternal uncle and a few advisors that very night. He knew that it was not good to rely too much on the power of the external relatives, but that was his biological uncle. If he could not even trust them, who else in the world was worthy of his trust? The sixth prince's uncle read the secret report. His eagle-like eyes darted around and he asked, "Acting king, is this true?" "The information is true." "Of course, it is true." The first uncle asked in a low voice, "Has the acting king thought about who to send to put on this show?" The sixth prince was stunned for a moment. He said, "I haven't thought about it yet." The maternal uncle smiled sinisterly and said meaningfully, "Why don't the acting king take this opportunity to clean up the mess?" The sixth prince's eyes darkened. He understood what his maternal uncle was hinting at. This was indeed a good opportunity to eradicate dissidents. Although he had become the acting king with the support of his maternal tribe, his other brothers were not without the ability to resist. If he did not completely suppress his brothers, his position as the acting king would be unstable. The acting king and the king only differed by one word, but the two could not be equated. "Uncle, let me think about it again." He could not show too much enthusiasm when dealing with his own brothers. It would make him look so cold and heartless. He said that he would think about it, but he was just being pretentious. The sixth prince targeted the eighth prince. The first and third prince were already useless. The fifth prince was useless. The eighth prince and the seventh prince teamed up to cause trouble. They were the biggest threat. Counting his surviving brothers, the sixth prince did not hesitate to aim the butcher's knife at his own brothers. The society of the northern borderline was like this. There was no brotherhood at all. When the father died, the sons could inherit the wives' and concubines' property. When the brothers died, their wives and children could also be inherited by their brothers. In such a chaotic and unruly society, these princes could not be expected to treat each other with respect. The eighth prince and the seventh prince did not know the plan, but their intuition told them that the sixth prince was up to no good. Isn't he afraid that the other brothers would have too much military power and overthrow him? Why did he agree to the eighth brother's command so readily? Although the seventh prince and the eighth prince were not born of the same mother, they had a good relationship and grew up in the same room. He is now the acting king. The northern borderline is still eyeing us covetously. At this time, we have to work together to overcome the difficulties. The eighth prince smiled and did not seem to take this matter to heart. Instead, he was very open-minded to persuade the seventh prince not to cause trouble. Eighth brother, you treat him as a brother, but he does not treat you as a brother. You are always so kind. Sooner or later, you will be schemed against by the sixth prince. The seventh prince shook his head with a worried look. Chapter 1003. The flags were like clouds, and the drums were like thunder. The strength of the northern borderline was greatly damaged, but a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Their foundation was still there, and they could still muster up tens of thousands of troops. The two armies faced each other, and the atmosphere was extremely heavy. Jiang Pengji rode on a warhorse, wearing armor. She held a broad-backed long sword in her right hand, and looked like she was ready to strike. Lord, it looks like the northern borderline has indeed been damaged. Fengzhen rode beside Jiang Pengji. He used his right hand to shield his forehead from the sun, avoiding the overly hot light. The two armies were far apart, and they maintained a safe distance to prevent the enemy from charging without saying a word and catching them off guard. Fengzhen squinted with difficulty, trying to discern the structure of the enemy's troops. Because of the outdated lighting equipment, most people in the ancient times were short-sighted, especially scholars. Fengzhen was no exception. Jiang Pengji was different. Her eyesight was very good, and she could clearly see things far away. Although there aren't as many cavalry as we imagined, we can't underestimate them. Even if there were only 10% of the cavalry, it was still more than 10,000 cavalry. If they charged together, the impact would be huge. Jiang Pengji tilted her head and glanced at Fengzhen, whose clothes were puffed up by the wind. She said angrily, Zisher should stay at the back to hold the line. I can't take care of you here. If you get hurt or captured, no one will feel sorry for you. Fengzhen only knew some martial arts. Calling him a weakling was already a compliment, and he still wanted to run to the front line to face the cavalry charge of the northern borderline. She was cold and heartless, and the live stream viewers felt sorry for him every day. Gaime, streamer, I think Feng Tian really loves you. You criticize him every day, but he doesn't leave you. Kong Dandan, that's impossible, Feng Tian only likes mature women with voluptuous breasts. Don't you think the streamer looks like a woman? Mei, Nyang, upstairs, you're making trouble. Although the streamer is quite manly, she has voluptuous breasts too. You're criticizing two people. The viewers on the red bullet screen laughed and laughed, but the viewers on the blue bullet screen didn't understand what they were so happy about. It couldn't be helped. They joined too late, so they didn't know that Fengzhen really loved the joke of an older sister disliking a lowly. Fengzhen didn't get angry even though he was rebuked. Instead, he thickened his skin and went along with the flow. He laughed and said, My lord, you're wrong. If something really happened to me, the children at home would definitely cry. How could you say that no one would feel sorry for them? Jiang Pengji didn't have time to deal with Fengzhen.
She looked straight ahead with a grave expression. If anyone could see it, they would realize that there was a huge screen floating in front of Jiang Pengji. Under her control, the camera angle of the live stream room suddenly rose, turning into a bird's-eye view mode. In this mode, she could clearly see the general arrangement of the troops at the rear of the northern borderline. For Jiang Pengji, this was probably the only benefit of watching the live stream, apart from understanding the situation and enjoying the show. At that moment, there was no advanced war equipment. Jiang Pengji had an advantage in the field of high altitude, which meant that she had a powerful trump card. Someone, hand this to General Fu. Jiang Pengji drew a simple picture of what she had memorized and sent it to Fu Wang. Although Jiang Pengji was the lord, the real commander-in-chief was someone else. As for her, how could one enjoy themselves on the battlefield without fighting? The sound of the drums was like thunder, resounding through the sky. The morale of the troops rose steadily. Even the viewers in the live stream room who were watching the live stream were affected and became hot-blooded. Tangmen Shengling Kai, the streamer must have been stifled recently. I can finally go out and have fun. Fusheng Ruotsai, my heart aches for the streamer's subordinates. It's exhausting to have such a lord. Gui Kai Guofengxiu, to be honest, I don't recommend that the streamer go out and have fun. It's too dangerous. Seriously, this seems to be the first time that the streamer has confronted the two armies of the northern borderline and faced them head-on. The cavalry's mobility is too strong, and their charge is fierce. The streamer is playing with her life. Xiao Wangsheng, the streamer has fought a few battles with the northern borderline. How can you say that this is the first time? Lo Siji Lianmeng, previously, it was either an ambush or a trick. There was more or less an element of trickery, so it can't be considered a head-on confrontation. It's different now. The two armies are facing each other. The streamer's side has to face the charge of more than 10,000 cavalry from the northern borderline. The meaning is different. The northern borderline is famous for their cavalry. They are the mighty army that roams the grasslands. Previously, they were separated by the Yi River. Later, when the man-made flood broke out, the cavalry of the northern borderline could not display their advantage at all. At this moment, the terrain is flat. It's very suitable for the cavalry of the northern borderline to charge. How can the combat index be the same? The current battlefield is more dangerous than before. As the Lord, Jiang Pengji still wants to go to war. It's no wonder that the audience feels so sorry for Jiang Pengji's subordinates. Jiang Pengji wore a faint smile on her face. She naturally understood what the audience could understand. However, the audience did not understand ancient wars after all. They did not know that their worries were unnecessary. Jiang Pengji is going to war, but it doesn't mean that she must be at the forefront. Most of the general's duties are to command and dispatch, not to kill the enemy. When the two armies are in a complete melee, the generals will only lead the troops to fight the enemy. If the main general is to charge and break through the enemy's first wave of firepower, no matter how many main generals there are, it will not be enough to kill them. Compared to Jiang Pengji's orderly side, the northern borderline is somewhat disharmonious. Everyone has their own ulterior motives. The 8th prince is dressed in a red military uniform. He is majestically riding on a horse. Beside him is the deputy general, the 7th prince, who is also dressed in an orange-yellow military uniform. What's the matter with the 6th prince? The 7th prince has a bad temper. He can't contain his anger. Is he a pig? There are not so many rules in war in the northern borderline. If they want to fight, they fight. If they want to retreat, they retreat. Even if they want to launch a sneak attack, it is straightforward. His suggestion is to take the lead and attack before Jiang Pengji's army completely sets up their formation. More than 10,000 cavalrymen charge together. The enemy is not prepared.
It is not a problem to launch a sneak attack. In the end, I don't know the sixth prince's temper. He insists on fighting with the other party. Fight my ass. The eighth prince has a faint smile on his face. However, those who are familiar with him know that his smile is slightly forced. In front of the two armies, at least leave the sixth prince some face. If this gets out, this will be the sixth prince's leverage to make things difficult for you. Fighting with the generals is not common. At least there is no such custom in the northern borderline. It is the habit of the northern borderline to start fighting without saying anything. Why would they give advance notice? I'm so angry, the seventh prince suppressed his temper. Under the scorching sun above his head, his whole body was filled with anger. Unknowingly, the sixth prince also has his own considerations. The Han men of the Central Plains are much weaker than the men of the northern borderline. They are petite and weak. The men of the northern borderline grew up on horseback. Their horsemanship is superb. If they can regain their momentum in the general's battle, wouldn't it be wonderful? The sixth prince is right. The northern borderline's horse battle is indeed tyrannical. However, the premise of victory is that they do not encounter Jiangpengji. I don't kill nameless people. Tell me your name. Chapter 1004. The northern borderline general's long hair was braided into countless small braids at the back of his head. He had a full beard that covered most of his face. His right ear was pierced 3 times. 3 earrings made of human bones hung from each hole. He held a heavy long axe in his hand. His voice was like a large bell. It could be heard from afar. The northern borderline general stared at the person who stepped out of the line. He frowned. The men of the Central Plains are all useless. Why did they send a sissy man like you? The northern borderline general sneered disdainfully. You're as thin as firewood. Your legs aren't even as thick as my arms. Look at you. I'm afraid you can't even satisfy your wife. Your legs will go weak after 1 round on the Kong bed, right? Ha ha ha. If you can't satisfy her, I'll help you. The northern borderline general said obscenities, but his eyes did not change. Obviously, his words were just to disturb the enemy's mood. The greater the emotional fluctuation, the easier it was to reveal flaws. Jiangpengji rode Little White forward slowly. She stopped more than 100 meters away from the other party. She wore a silver armor that day. The armor was thick and heavy. Her cleavage had long been tied up, so the rise and fall of her womanly figure could not be seen. Although she was a woman, she was already 175 meters tall. This height was enough to make her look superior to most men. Jiangpengji looked rather handsome and strong. The men of the Central Plains were fashionable with hairpin flowers and incense. She looked sissy. Comparing the two, Jiangpengji, a real woman, was more manly than many men. The people of the northern borderline had never seen her before. She also did not engrave her name on her face. Who would know that she was the leader of the 150,000 troops behind her? She was the real lord. Jiangpengji lowered her voice and said seriously, "What does it have to do with you whether I can satisfy a woman or not? I only want to satisfy the man at home. Look at how ugly you are. I'm afraid you're so ugly that you can't even find a wife. Why don't you consider finding a male partner? Anyway, with your appearance, having a child will be a scourge to future generations. It's better to have fun in time. At least you're not alone." Jiangpengji was really a man, driving a train in front of more than 300,000 people from the two armies. Because they were far away, the army behind them did not know what they said, but the audience in the streaming room knew. For a moment, the entire screen was filled with praises for Jiangpengji. "Fix all high-definition loopholes, that's amazing. My streamer, when did you sleep with Beauty CI? Oh, Christmas Day, sob, I've been cuckolded by both my idol and my goddess. It's so sad. Jing Wazengshi, Beauty CI wants to beat someone up after hearing this. I bet that the streamer hasn't eaten anyone yet. When the Northern Borderline general heard this, he immediately revealed a disgusted expression. Bah! You're actually a rabbit. Tell me your name, I'm going to chop your bones and feed them to the dogs. He had long heard that the men of the Central Plains were very popular, but he did not expect to meet a young general of the Central Plains who was also a man. Uncle Rabbit? Did Lord Rabbit eat your rice? She teased him with a smile. Her casual attitude made him so angry that he felt as if he had been born into the world. She said, speaking of which, you have a strange habit. Every time you kill someone, you always ask for their name before you do it. I'm different, you don't have to tell me your name, I've killed too many people, I'm too lazy to remember. What did it mean by, the blade does not behead the nameless? It meant that he would not kill if he did not tell her his name. Just imagine, when two armies were at war and there was chaos, he would yell at a person and ask him what his name was. The scene was quite beautiful. The Northern Borderline general intended to disturb Jiang Pengji's mood, but he did not expect to be angered by her instead. Little brat, give me your life. Since he could not win in words, he would fight. He held his long axe and clamped his legs on the horse's belly. He took the lead in attacking Jiang Pengji. The edge of the long axe drew a white light in the air, like a snow-white lightning bolt, and struck toward Jiang Pengji. The warhorse under him was encouraged by its owner, and its movements were steady and agile. The warhorse of the Northern Borderline had a good bloodline. Even if the owner on its back was extremely heavy, its movements were not slow. Little White was not willing to fall behind a horse. It had the advantages of the Northern Borderline warhorse and the Fergana horse of Xiaofan. Whether it was endurance or explosive power, it was one of the best. Except for White, it had never been afraid of any warhorse. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, Little White, take it easy. Compared to Little White's high fighting spirit, as the owner, she was a little lazy, as if the horse was free to do whatever it wanted. Seeing this, the Northern Borderline general's anger rose high. How could this slender Central Plains rookie look down on him so much? Anger rose in his heart, and the strength in his hands increased. Clang, the axe and the big knife collided, making a harsh sound. He thought he could use his great strength to knock Jiang Pengji off the horse, but he did not expect that she was not a normal person at all. Little White, who was under him, felt the strength on his back increase. He roared loudly, and 2 streams of hot air came out of his nostrils. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, Aya, such a weak strength, not to mention women, I'm afraid even men will despise it. Jiang Pengji admitted that she was the second most despicable person in a war, but who dared to admit that they were the first? Don't be arrogant. The axe went down, and the stronger and heavier force made his heart sink. Even the web between his thumb and index finger was numb. Jiang Pengji steered Little White to take a step back, and the Northern Borderline general took the opportunity to catch up. Although the long axe in his hand was cumbersome, weighing at least 30 to 40 kilograms, it was as light as a feather in his hand. If it was in the past, who would dare to fight him head-on? Even if the person could withstand the axe, the war horse under him would not be able to. Jiang Pengji was still at ease. The two kept fighting, and it seemed that they were equally matched. The layman just watched the show, while the expert knew the ropes. The audience in the streaming room knew that Jiang Pengji was fooling around, but seeing the fierce fight between the two, they still broke out in a cold sweat for Jiang Pengji. That person's horse can't take it anymore. Fu Wang had excellent eyesight, and after a careful look, he found the trick. Just as Fu Wang said, the war horse under the Northern Borderline general was already showing signs of fatigue. Its 2 forelimbs were trembling, and it looked like it could not bear the burden. Seeing this situation,
Jiang Pengji changed her defensive posture and turned defense into offense, forcing the northern borderline general to be tired of dealing with it. Who knew how this person grew up? How could he have such great strength? Every time he received a blow, he felt his wrist shake, and the web between his thumb and index finger had already cracked and bled. Little White, Jiang Pengji suddenly shouted without any rhyme or reason. Little White suddenly rushed toward the opponent's war horse, raising its front hooves and charging over fearlessly. Not good, the war horse under the northern borderline general was so scared that it retreated. It did not care about its owner's orders at all. Little White took advantage of the situation and rammed into the opponent, causing him and his horse to tilt to the side. Jiang Pengji smiled, revealing her white teeth. The long sword drew a cold and brilliant white light in the air. Poof, the long sword slashed diagonally down from the general's neck, and it easily split open like a knife cutting through tofu. The war horse under it lost control and fell to the side, whining. The two halves of the corpse fell to the ground, making a dull sound. The pair of eyes on the head that were filled with fear lost their spirit in a few breaths. Jiang Pengji carried the sword on her shoulder and pointed her finger at the northern borderline. Chapter 1005. Little White cooperated and snorted. It was super fierce. The north borderline was silent. The sixth prince's expression was so grave that it could drip water. That strong man was a valiant general he had high hopes for, but he was gone just like that. What was his background? I heard that Lu Shi has the most valiant general, the wolf general Fu Wang. Could it be him? Fu Wang was not well known under Jiang Pengji's command. After all, he had been training the troops for the past few years. However, he often acted recklessly when he was under Fu Yang and Meng Zhan. That was when his reputation was built. The north borderline advocated military force. With Fu Wang's background, he was naturally valued. He was raised by wolves. In the north borderline, he was a symbol of luck and bravery. He was an idol sought after by many. I don't think so. I heard that Fu Wang is commanding the three armies. Why would he easily fight with others? After thinking about it, it seemed that the only person who fit the criteria was Li Yun. Although Li Yun was young, he had fought many battles with Jiang Pengji. He gradually gained the nickname Little White Dragon. Of course, Li Yun rejected the nickname. So be it, White Dragon. Why add the word small? Who gave him the nickname? Could it be Little White Dragon Li Yun? Doesn't look like it. Li Yun is good with the spear. It's said that his skill with it is superb. This person's age fits and he looks like him. But I've never heard of Li Yun using a sword. Could it be that Lu Shi has subdued another valiant general? At this point, he could not help but feel jealous. The battlefield was an ever-changing place. Usually, people would bring out their best weapons. If they died under the enemy's blade because their weapon was not convenient to use, it would be a terrible death. Damn it. Lu Shi is just a woman. How can she attract the help of so many heroes? The sixth prince was envious. The jealousy in his heart almost drowned him. He said sourly, could it be because she is an outstanding beauty? The deputy beside him secretly rolled his eyes. Only a fool would think that people sided with Jiang Pengji because of her beauty. Jiang Pengji's reputation was well known. There were many things said about her, but no one said that she was beautiful. What did that mean? It meant that her appearance was not worthy of praise or bragging. The sixth prince did not know what was going on in the deputy general's mind. He said, which brave warrior is willing to eradicate the traitors for the northern borderline? As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of horse hooves came from the crowd. A young northern borderline general dismounted his horse and volunteered. I am willing to go. The sixth prince looked at the young general's face and was unhappy. This young general was his wife's younger brother, his brother-in-law. Blades and swords had no eyes on the battlefield, and the death rate of a general was extremely high. His brother-in-law was young and impetuous. What if he lost his life because of carelessness? Even the old general had suffered a setback, let alone his brother-in-law. Just as he was about to refuse, the other party volunteered again, and the sixth prince could only agree. "Be careful of the enemy's tricks and return safely," the sixth prince urged politely. After the young general thanked him, he picked up his weapon and mounted his horse. Young people, especially young people who have not experienced real setbacks, often have dreams that are far from reality. Seeing that Jiang Pengji, who was younger than him, had beheaded an old general on his side, he was indignant. He couldn't wait to rush out and fight to his heart's content. He boasted as soon as he appeared. "I'm Haki, the one who's about to cut off your head. What's your name? Tell me your name." Jiang Pengji didn't say anything. The audience in the streaming room said what she wanted to say. "Kakara, Aya, this is probably the funniest joke I've heard this year. Wuxia Yaoyao, haha, this fellow is going to be a trending topic on Weibo. He's going to become an internet celebrity in minutes." With the popularity of the streaming room in their world, this young man named Haki would definitely be a trending topic in seconds. Jiang Pengji smiled. "Me? I call you Grandpa." Haki was stunned for a moment. His face turned from red to green. "How dare you make fun of me?" After he finished speaking, he carried his weapon and charged forward. Seeing this, Jiang Pengji couldn't help but laugh even more happily. "Is there no one else in the northern borderline? They actually sent you out to embarrass yourself." The sound of weapons clashing was deafening. Jiang Pengji deftly dealt with it while provoking the other party's emotions. They started fighting without even saying a few words. His temperament and willpower were very poor. Even if he had a body full of martial arts, it would be difficult for him to survive on the battlefield for long. If he met someone else, he might be able to go back and correct himself. If he met Jiang Pengji, he could only go to hell to prepare to be reincarnated and sent back to the furnace to be reborn. Haki was furious. His attacks became heavier and heavier. Soon, cracks appeared on their weapons, and sparks flew everywhere. He seized the opportunity and made his move. He thought he could hit his target with one strike, but the other party seemed to have predicted it and quickly blocked his attack. Regardless of strength or combat experience, Haki was incomparable to the previous veteran. Jiang Pengji didn't even bother to brush him off. After a while, Haki was at a disadvantage. His arms were heavy and swollen. He saw that the situation was not good. He made a feint and immediately turned his horse around to escape while Jiang Pengji was dodging. Little did he know that Jiang Pengji had already seen through his plan. As he turned around, Jiang Pengji bent down and raised her hand to retrieve the bow and arrow on the back of the little white horse. In the time it took to get up, she knocked the arrow and drew the bow in one go. When Jiang Pengji released the arrow, Haki had only taken a few steps. Haki looked at his army and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Before he could let out this sigh of relief, a cold wind hit his back. No, the sixth prince didn't see Jiang Pengji's action. Or rather, he couldn't react at all. In the blink of an eye, he saw Haki's body being pierced through by the arrow. His body fell forward violently. Quickly send someone to bring General Haki back," the sixth prince almost broke his voice as he shouted. This was his wife's younger brother, his brother-in-law. It wasn't that he had a good relationship with this brother-in-law. It was just that the sixth prince needed the power of his wife's family. If Haki died on the battlefield, the sixth prince could foresee the trouble he would face. His wife's noise was secondary. He was afraid that his father-in-law would put the blame on his head and no longer support him. The sixth prince roared anxiously. Immediately,
Someone rode out and brought Haki's body back. Yes, a body. No one in the world knew the structure of the human body better than her. No one knew better than her where life could be taken. This was a battlefield. The enemy standing in front of her had to die. When Haki was brought back, his body was still warm, but the gaping hole in his body couldn't be plugged. Haki, Haki, the sixth prince hurriedly got off the carriage, but Haki's pupils were already unfocused. He was no longer breathing. Seeing this, the sixth prince felt as if he had been hit hard with a sledgehammer. He stood rooted to the ground, stunned. He's gone. Dead? The sixth prince's heart rose and fell violently. His mind was in a mess. Haki was dead. Someone had to take responsibility for this. A stern look flashed in his eyes. He shouted, "Abalu." The general who had been called stepped forward. "Here. Kill that man." Abalu was stunned. He couldn't even defeat the first veteran general who fought generals. How could he kill the enemy's general? Wasn't he courting death by going up to fight? Chapter 1006. TSK. Another one is here to die. If you die too, won't the morale of the north borderline collapse? Jiang Pengji carried the blood-stained knife on her shoulder and sneered at Abalu, who was spurring his horse forward. Abalu pursed his lips tightly. He was burly and fat, and his temper was like a block of wood. He could not utter a word for a long time. His temperament was a little dull, but his psychological quality on the battlefield was higher than that of the average person because they were less affected by trash talk. Cut the crap. Let's fight. Abalu said this and fought as soon as he said so. He knew that he was no match for Jiang Pengji, but he still had a glimmer of hope in his heart. Jiang Pengji had already fought with two people. They had exchanged more than 100 blows back and forth. She must have exhausted a lot of energy. If he took advantage of this, he might be able to win. Even if he could not win, he could retreat unscathed if he was careful. However, his wishful thinking collapsed very quickly. When he fought with Jiang Pengji for the first time, a huge force that was as heavy as a mountain almost knocked him off his horse. The war horse he was riding on even neighed strenuously. Abalu knew that the first two people did not die unjustly. When strangers saw Jiang Pengji, they would subconsciously think that she walked the path of agility and did not have much strength. Ordinary people always thought that strength was related to size. The bigger the size, the greater the strength. Abalu was extremely heavy, so naturally, his strength was great. Although he was not the strongest person in the north borderline, he could be ranked in the top 10. He never expected that the young man in front of him would not walk the normal path. Only after fighting with him did he know how terrifying his strength was. Abalu subconsciously thought that Jiang Pengji did not have enough strength and suffered a small loss in the first encounter. He groaned, adjusted himself, and faced the attack again. At the same time, find the person with the best archery skills and kill that fellow. The sixth prince looked coldly at the two people fighting on the battlefield. He knew that Abalu's chances were slim, but he still let Abalu go. It was just to let Abalu attract Jiang Pengji's attention and then send someone to assassinate Jiang Pengji in the dark. His father-in-law only had 2 sons. The eldest son was dead. Not only was Haki his father-in-law's only son, but he was also his father-in-law's only son. His father-in-law would definitely blame this on him. He might even turn around and support another brother to replace him as the acting king. In order to avoid this possibility, the sixth prince could only use the murderer's head to appease his anger. Sneak attack? Despicable? The northern borderline isn't like the inflexible Hans of the Central Plains. They don't have to pay attention to so many rules when fighting a war. Victory was everything. Who would look into the methods used in the process? In addition, the sixth prince had his own considerations. They had already lost 2 generals in the Battle of Generals, and their morale had dropped by more than half. They had to think of a way to recover. The northern borderline was not only good at horsemanship, but they were also very good at archery. Almost every citizen of the northern borderline grew up on the back of a horse, and they were top-notch in riding and archery. Sneak an arrow or something, no problem at all. Abelu was completely unaware that he had become a sacrificial victim to lure the enemy. He was trying his best to fight Jiang Pengji and was soon out of breath. The sun was shining brightly, and Abelu's body was covered in sweat. Soon, his hair and the clothes under his armor were drenched. The more it was like this, the more terrified Abelu was. Why? Because not only was the brat in front of him breathing steadily, he didn't even sweat much after fighting for so long. This meant that the other party had not used his full strength and had been toying with him from the beginning to the end. Realizing this, Abelu knew that there was no need for him to continue fighting. He should think of a way to leave the battlefield as soon as possible. If he continued to fight, his physical strength would be consumed more and more, and his hope of escaping would become slimmer. While Abelu was thinking about how to escape, Jiang Pengji felt a chill. She made a feint and retreated. She glanced at the northern borderline from the corner of her eyes and saw the soldiers who were holding the line for Abelu raise their bows and arrows at her. The audience in the streaming room reacted and started cursing. Yamada Mia, what the F***ck? Does the northern borderline have any shame? They plan to sneak an arrow in the back. Streamer, be careful. Ye can, damn, are these people from the northern borderline not afraid of accidentally injuring their own people? How shameless. Accidentally injuring one's own people? The 6th prince had already given up on Abelu. As long as Jiang Pengji died or was about to die, Abelu's sacrifice would be worth it. Therefore, the archers who aimed at Jiang Pengji did not care about Abelu at all. When Jiang Pengji glanced at them from the corner of her eyes, the bow had already been pulled to a full moon, ready to shoot. Buzz, buzz, only the sound of the bowstring vibrating could be heard. Several arrows sneakily attacked Jiang Pengji's vital parts from various tricky angles. The arrows pierced through the air. The audience who had been paying attention to the situation on the battlefield screamed and closed their eyes in fright. Jiang Pengji, who had been at ease all this while, suddenly launched an attack. She stabbed Abelu to death with a knife and grabbed his collarbone with her other hand. She pulled him down from the horse's back and used him as a human shield to block several poisoned arrows. She then used her weapon to knock down the remaining arrows. Little White did not need Jiang Pengji's command. He turned around and ran back to his army. At that moment, Little White's explosive power was displayed. Before the archers could draw the second wave, Little White had already run out of the shooting range with Jiang Pengji. Jiang Pengji smiled and threw the corpse of Abelu, who had died with grievances, on the ground. Everyone, kill. The war drums were as dense as a rainstorm. The horn to attack sounded. Jiang Pengji defeated 3 people consecutively and dodged the enemy's hidden arrows. The soldiers who witnessed everything were suppressing their anger and were eager to vent it. The 6th prince saw the situation and was so scared that his face turned pale. Damn it, she attacked as she said and attacked as she said. At least give them some buffer time. Kill, the battle cries shook the sky. Their own cavalry took the lead to attack. Countless horse hooves passed by and Abelu's corpse was trampled into meat paste. Jiang Pengji seized the initiative. The northern borderline was slightly hasty in meeting the enemy. By the time the northern borderline cavalry reacted, Jiang Pengji's cavalry had already charged for quite a distance. Jiang Pengji's cavalry was different from the northern borderline cavalry. The northern borderline cavalry mainly wore rattan armor and cloth clothes. Their horses were almost unprotected. They were extremely fast and ran like a gust of wind. They were highly mobile but had weak defensive capabilities. Jiang Pengji's cavalry was different. The armor on their bodies was similar to the soldiers of the Zhanma battalion. Each of them wore heavy armor and held long spears or broadswords. Not only that, but even the war horses they were riding on were all equipped with armor. The war horses were not considered fast, but their load-bearing and endurance were much better than other horses of the same kind. This was one of Jiang Pengji's trump cards to deal with the northern borderline. There were only about 3,000 people, which was even fewer than the Zhanma battalion. Each of them was like a small moving silver mountain. If the northern borderline cavalry was said to be the wind that roamed and fought, this cavalry troop was a heavy hammer that faced them head-on. Fu Wang was the commander in the middle. He had already received a small piece of paper from Jiang Pengji. On it was a drawing of the military formation in the northern borderline. After Fu Wang looked at it carefully, he had an idea. Chapter 1007. Bah, this scriptwriter is sick in the head. He made up stories about Her Majesty. I really want to rush into the TV and beat him up. A young and pretty girl hugged a bag of chips, lying on the bed and watching a TV series on her phone. She angrily hit the bed with her fist, and the facial mask on her face almost fell off. Nowadays, 9 out of 10 scriptwriters are retarded, and there's even one who's still online. I told you not to watch these messy dramas, but you insisted on watching them. Aren't you torturing yourself? A lazy voice came from the neighboring bed. What are you watching? Time Travel to Fall in Love with You, the most popular male lead. Speaking of this, her expression stiffened, as if she had swallowed a fly. Chen Chen, do you know what the plot of a TV series is? The royal family is too kind not to kill these nonsense scriptwriters. My Majesty, the TV series turned into a vicious and scheming female supporting character. She's so stupid as if she forgot to give birth to her uterus. The eternal emperor turned into a retarded and black-hearted lotus. It was an insult to her intelligence. The neighboring bed named Chen Chen rolled her eyes. Anyway, it's all fake. They can act however they want, the royal family doesn't care, so why is Min Min so serious? Jiang Chen, Gu Min dragged her voice and muttered, these plots can easily mislead children. If Her Majesty was the idiot in the TV series, how could she have swept the world? I don't expect these scriptwriters to have good history, but at least they have some professional ethics. Jiang Chen was wearing teddy bear pajamas, lying on the bed with her legs crossed, looking indifferent. Television dramas are things that are meant to entertain people. Under the premise of respecting history, they can imagine anything. Jiang Chen searched the bed and found a bag of chips. She threw it to Gu Min. Although their plots are a bit ridiculous, no scriptwriter would dare to fabricate things of principle, such as maliciously discrediting the previous emperors, changing dynasties, etc. Gu Min caught the bag of chips and turned off her phone. She was annoyed at the thought of the retarded plot. TSK, if it was 100 years ago, who would dare to make up the royal family like this? Wouldn't they be killed? Jiang Chen smiled. It's a society ruled by law. Murder is against the law, even the royal empress. Gu Min rested her chin on her hand. You're right. When I become a screenwriter in the future, I'll definitely correct the culture of the industry and restore history. She was a student majoring in film and television literature at Tianhua University. Her future career goal was to be a screenwriter. Jiang Chen said, that's quite an ambition. Gu Min said, Chen Chen, do you think I should use Emperor Chen as the main character for my first movie? Her idol was definitely someone who could punch Nanshan Jing far away and kick Beihai Kindergarten. Jiang Chen chewed on the chips in her mouth with a slightly amused expression, but she also gave a serious suggestion. Empress Chen is too controversial. It's not easy to adapt her. I don't recommend new screenwriters to use her as the main character. Both historians and the royal family could prove that Emperor Qin came from a noble family, but no one knew why he became a bandit. Not only did she become a bandit, but there were also records of her slaughtering her siblings and her biological father in the history books. However, the unofficial history books also said that she was born from Guzhen and a wild man. There were even a few wild men who were analyzed. Her family background was very complicated, and her growth was even more tortuous. It was too difficult for a new screenwriter to use Emperor Qin as the main character. It's precisely because it's challenging that we have to clear Her Majesty's name. There are too many screenwriters with no professional ethics now. Ever since Emperor Qin's tomb was open to the public, the television and online dramas are getting more and more ridiculous, Gu Min muttered angrily. Qin, have you ever thought about what history would be like without Her Majesty? It definitely wouldn't be as good as it is now. Jiang Qin did not speak. Her gaze darkened. Emperor Qin's tomb was open to the public, the royal family was still around, but Emperor Qin's tomb was open to the public. It was a joke. The royal family's prestige for 300 years was gone. Jiang Qin said, "Don't worry, these screenwriters will be dealt with sooner or later. By the time you clean up the atmosphere, it will be too late." The royal family voluntarily handed over their power and changed the feudal monarchy to a constitutional monarchy. Although they were forced by external forces, it was more of a strategy for the royal family to protect themselves, adapt to the times, and advance by taking a step back. Handing over a portion of their power did not mean that the royal family could be controlled by others. Gu Min hugged the thick history book and gnawed at it. Halfway through, she said, Qin, huh? Don't you think that Emperor Qin might be a time traveler? The more she studied the history of that period, the more she felt that her emperor was arrogant. She had the urge to kneel down at any moment. Jiang Qin said impatiently. I don't know if she's a time traveler. I only know that if you don't sleep now, you will ascend to immortality. Look at the time. Gu Min looked at the time. It was 3:00 in the morning. She was so scared that she quickly lifted her blanket. Tomorrow is the class of the old scumbag, Lu Shi. I'm screwed. She did not know how much Lu Shi's parents hated their son to give him such a name. Lu Shi was 29 years old, single, and had no girlfriend. He was given the nickname Old Scumbag. Lu Shi was also a history professor at Tianhua University. She wondered if he would feel awkward when he talked about the history of Emperor Qin's parents. Jiang Qin could not help but laugh. However, the smile on her face did not last long. Her phone, which she rarely used, rang. She unlocked her phone and walked barefoot to the bathroom in the corridor. She opened the door and went to the bathroom. Hello? Crown Prince Huichang, something bad has happened. Emperor Qin's tomb is abnormal. The main tomb's dome suddenly collapsed. A cold light flashed in Jiang Qin's eyes. How could the tomb's dome suddenly collapse? She turned around and went back to the dormitory. In order not to disturb Gu Min's sleep, she did not even turn on the lights. She grabbed her things and went out in her pajamas. As soon as she left the campus, Jiang Qin found that the sky was unusually dark. She looked up and felt that something was wrong with the sky. Doesn't it look like the alignment of the 9 stars? A clean male voice came from behind. Jiang Qin turned around with a sullen face. A tall man in a suit walked out of the shadows. Professor Lu Shi adjusted the gold-rimmed glasses on the bridge of his nose. His eyes were calm, as if he was not surprised by Jiang Qin's appearance in her pajamas. The alignment of the 9 stars is a rare sight, Lu Shi said. But it happened once more than 300 years ago. The professor is waiting for someone here? Jiang Qin calculated the time and wanted to send Lu Shi away. No, I'm waiting for you. Jiang Qin did not show it on her face, but she frowned in her heart. I don't seem to know the professor. It doesn't matter if you know him or not. I just want to give you something. If it was any other time, Jiang Chen would have thought that he was interested in her. But in the current situation, she only felt that it was dangerous. What is it? Lu Shi took out something from his pocket and handed it to Jiang Chen. It's returned to its owner. Jiang Chen was surprised. She took the thing and could barely recognize that it was a yin-yang fish jade pendant. Lu Shi's body heat still lingered on it. Returned to its owner? It's not mine. Jiang Chen wanted to return the jade pendant, but Lu Shi looked up at the sky and smiled. The 9 stars are aligned. What? The alignment of the 9 stars didn't last long, and soon they were separated. At that moment, Jiang Chen's phone rang again. It was the ringtone she had set for Gu Min's phone. Chen, where are you? Gu Min's voice sounded extremely panicked. I'm at the campus gate. Don't move. Chen, don't move. I'll go find you. Also, don't go with Lu Shi. A hint of surprise flashed across Jiang Chen's eyes. Gu Min should be sleeping in the dormitory. How did she know that Lu Shi was there? Not long after, Gu Min stopped her bicycle in front of the two of them. The sudden braking made a sharp sound. She was still in her pajamas. Nothing had changed, but Jiang Chen somehow felt that her aura was much stronger. Slap. Under Jiang Chen's shocked gaze, she took a few steps forward and slapped Lu Shi across the face. The force was so strong that half of Lu Shi's face became red and swollen. Jiang Chen was speechless. What development? Gu Min glanced at Jiang Chen and saw the jade pendant in her hand. She quickly snatched it and threw it at Lu Shi's face. Lu Shi. She cursed. F***CKU. Ah Min? Lu Shi didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed as if he wasn't the one who had been slapped. Are you still human? Gu Min was so angry that the veins on her forehead were bulging. Her expression was a bit ferocious. Why did you give this stupid jade pendant to Chen? Why did you trick her into bringing it to the tomb? What are you scheming in your stomach? Tell me. Don't play dumb. Lu Shi smiled bitterly. If I said that I didn't do anything, would you believe me? Tell that to a ghost. Gu Min said angrily. If I believe you again, I'll write my name backwards. Jiang Chen watched the situation unfold. Her brain couldn't wrap itself around it. When did Min become so close to Professor Lu Shi? Those things. I really didn't do them, Gu Min laughed. What nonsense are you trying to lie to me now? Can you listen to my explanation? It'll only take about 3 minutes. Okay, kneel and explain. As usual, prepare your own washing board. After Gu Min finished speaking, she took a deep breath and turned to look at Jiang Chen. She thought that she had forgotten her roommate's face after traveling through time for almost 30 years. When she woke up from the nightmare, she found that she remembered clearly. She even remembered every detail of the stupid dramas she had complained about with her roommate before she traveled through time. Chen, let me deal with this scumbag first. I'll beat him to death. Jiang Chen frowned. What did he do to you? Gu Min said, he's worse than I am. Seeing the strange atmosphere between the two, Jiang Chen was worried, but she trusted Gu Min. Although Gu Min was slender, she was very good at fighting. If you can't handle it, remember to call me. Jiang Chen said that, but in her mind, she wanted to go back and investigate Lu Shi. Kneel. Now you can explain. Gu Min was upset, but she also knew that they were arguing outside of Tianhua University. If they were accidentally photographed by a night owl, they might become famous on the internet. So, she decided to change their location and went to Lu Shi's apartment. Lu Shi said, there's only a washing machine at home. There's no washing board. I'll take the keyboard. Gu Min saw his obedient look and his familiar eyes. Her heart ached uncontrollably. She forced herself to hold back. "Tell me, Lu Zhongqing. I'd like to hear what you have to say." "Lu," she said, "Min, do you still remember what happened when you first discussed marriage?" "Of course I remember. I should have randomly chosen a man to marry. Which one of them wouldn't be better than you, Lu Zhongqing?" "Lu," she smiled bitterly. "I really worked hard back then, but I didn't study hard enough and wasted too much precious time. But your marriage could only be delayed by 2 years. One day, when I was studying late into the night, an immortal suddenly appeared outside my window and gifted me with a miraculous elixir. He said that if I ate this, my future studies would be as good as having been blessed by the gods. At that time, I was really anxious and tried everything I could think of. If you can give me 3 to 5 years, I will definitely marry you in a just and honorable manner." "But..." "Ha!" Gu Min sneered. "Then what?" "Then you, Lu Zhongqing, took the elixir and opened your conception and governing vessels. You became a straight-A student? Do you think this is a Xianxia or Wuxia drama? A cannon fodder who can't even make a splash in history wants to become the main character." Lu Shi shook his head and whispered, "It's not like that." "Then what's going on?" Gu Min's patience was running out. To Lu Shi, he had waited for a long time. To Gu Min, the memories of her previous life had just happened. She had just passed away from an illness filled with resentment. She had forgiven Lu Shi before she died, but now that she had transmigrated back, there was no need to forgive. "Can you say everything in one sentence?" Lu Shi stammered, "Min, I'm not a human. I know you're not a human. You're a ghost. I've known you for more than 20 years and slept with you for nearly 10 years, but I realized that I never understood you. This is my failure. I deserve to be deceived by you because I couldn't protect my child. If you were a human, how did Dalong and Erlang die?" Gu Min was so angry that she stood up. She looked like she was about to break down. Her youthful face lost its restraint. She grabbed Lu Shi's suit fiercely. Her face was full of tears, and she sobbed in a low voice, "Lu Zhongqing, I still want to believe you now, but I was blinded by greed." Chapter 1008. 3,000 heavy cavalrymen and 10,000 light cavalrymen charging at each other. What a spectacular and shocking scene it was. The viewers in the live stream watched everything from a bird's-eye view, and this scene had the greatest impact on them. Jiang Pengji seized the initiative. The people of the north borderline were passive in defense, but they soon displayed the qualities that a nomadic people should have. Their reaction quality was admirable. The sixth prince heaved a sigh of relief when he realized that Jiang Pengji's cavalrymen numbered no more than 3,000. What was the use of 3,000 cavalrymen charging into an army of more than 100,000? Moreover, these cavalrymen were all wearing heavy armor, and their horses were also covered in fish-scale armor. How fast could they move? The terrain of the northern frontier was relatively flat, and it had a natural advantage for the highly mobile light cavalry. This terrain also allowed the cavalry's roundabout tactics to be used to the greatest extent. In comparison, the speed of the heavy cavalry was a notch lower, and their marching speed was also slower. The cavalry of the northern borderline was as fast as the wind, coming and going without a trace. Even if they were robbed of the initiative, they would still be able to gain the upper hand by bypassing the front of the heavy cavalry and circling to the enemy's 2 weak flanks. The north borderline knew about Jiang Pengji's plan in advance because of the spy who had pretended to surrender. They simply avoided the frontal attack and attacked the 2 weaker flanks. Seeing that the battlefield was stabilized, the sixth prince immediately felt reassured. The grassland was the world of the 3 tribes of the northern borderline. It was also the home ground of the cavalry of the northern borderline. If they fought head-on, Jiang Pengji and the others would return in defeat. Fu Wang sneered, "Idiot, he couldn't take care of the entire battlefield," but when he learned that the northern borderline cavalry had avoided a head-on charge and turned to attack the weak point, he knew that the northern borderline would suffer a great loss. It was true that 3,000 ordinary cavalrymen charging into an army of 100,000 might not cause much of a stir, but this was heavy cavalry. The spectators who were overlooking the entire battlefield were able to see it more directly. Glutinous rice ball warrior, is the northern borderline too poor to form a cavalry unit? Feng Yi Yuran Chu, #picknose, isn't the northern borderline a poor countryside? Can't you see that their cavalry is basically made of rattan armor? The audience lived in an era of information explosion. If they wanted to know something, they could just search the internet. Ever since they knew that Jiang Pengji was going to fight with the northern borderline, many viewers had looked up the relevant history. Light cavalry had the advantages of light cavalry, speed and mobility. Heavy cavalry lost their advantage in speed, but their destructive power increased. Drunken Cloud Cat Demon, the northern borderline is vast, and there is more room for light cavalry to survive. The cost of forming heavy cavalry is too high. Of course, they wouldn't choose heavy cavalry that would cost a lot of effort. It wasn't that they were ignorant, it was just that the northern borderline didn't have the soil for the development of heavy cavalry. They only remembered the speed of the light cavalry, but they did not know the cutting formation and destructive power of the heavy cavalry. Gue Kai Guo Fengshao, Tisk, TSK. I feel sorry for the northern borderline. Letting the light cavalry make full use of their mobility to launch a sneak attack on the two flanks of the streamer's army is a good command, but they exposed their own army to the heavy cavalry's attack. To be honest, this is not the way to die. Lo Siji Lianmeng, I remember that the warhorses that the host chose for the heavy cavalry camp are all heavy horses. They weigh between 700 to 1,200 kilograms and are taller than adult men. A warhorse weighed at least 700 kilograms, and an adult man weighed at least 70 kilograms. The armor, weapons, and miscellaneous items on his body weighed 30 kilograms. Think about it. More than 3,000 items weighing as much as 800 kilograms collided head-on. They didn't just move one or two, but more than 3,000 of them charged together. The northern borderline only cared about the small number of Jiang Pengji's cavalry and that they couldn't do anything. They forgot the terrifying destructive power of the heavy cavalry. The cavalry of the northern borderline attacked one step slower than the enemy, but they took the initiative to fight with the two flanks of Jiang Pengji's army. The left wing of the army was led by Li Yun. He had been waiting there for a long time. The soldiers of the horse-chopping battalion were already in a battle formation. The spears that were specially prepared for the cavalry of the northern borderline had also been prepared. They were set up in rows. The spears were 2 feet in diameter, with cross-shaped holes. They were checked vertically and horizontally. They were long and sharp at the end. Men and horses couldn't gallop. This was a barrier used to stop the cavalry of the northern borderline from charging. The soldiers could also use it to form a horse formation to greatly limit the cavalry's charge. Raise your shields. First row. Stab. First row, retreat. Second row, follow up. Li Yun shouted. Immediately, specialized soldiers raised the correct battle flag and gave the command. The cavalry of the northern borderline had a large number of people. Their reflexes were extremely fast. When the first batch of soldiers were pierced by the spears, the cavalry behind immediately circled around and attacked in a roundabout way. Li Yun commanded the soldiers to move the spears, exhausting the elite troops of the northern borderline as much as possible. When the line of defense was broken, the soldiers of the horse-chopping battalion put up their shields and formed a formation to resist the cavalry's charge. The soldiers behind then stabbed the enemy with their spears. The cavalry of the northern borderline could not break the left wing's defense line in a short time. Instead, they suffered heavy losses. Damn it. Did this look like a weak defense? In contrast, the battlefield on the right wing was different. The cavalry of the northern borderline acted as if there was no one there. They killed each other. However, as they killed and killed, the 8th prince, who was commanding the battlefield on the right wing, realized that something was wrong. Why were the enemies they were fighting with all the deep-faced barbarians of the northern borderline? He immediately thought of the tribes that had pretended to surrender to Jiangpengji. He was shocked. However, there was no time for him to think in a place like the battlefield. The cavalry of the northern borderline reacted too quickly. When the 8th prince realized that something was wrong, the troops of the northern borderline who had pretended to surrender to the right wing's front line were mostly dead. She deliberately relaxed the right wing's defense line. Wasn't it to let the northern borderline shoot themselves in the foot? Scheming against her? When she, Jiangpengji, dominated the interstellar battlefield, the fathers of these young boys were still little tadpoles. All troops, listen to my command. When Jiangpengji saw that it was about time, the real bugle horn sounded. In an instant, it aroused the soldiers' fighting spirit. At the same time, more than 3,000 heavy cavalry had already rushed into the army of the northern borderline. To make a vivid analogy, the heavy cavalry were bandits who entered the village. The northern borderline were the little girls in the village. Each of them was naked, without a single piece of clothing, and they looked shy. Although this analogy was a little inappropriate, for the northern borderline, they had indeed suffered inhumane ravages. It was difficult for 1 or 2 heavy cavalry to cause large-scale destruction, but what about 3,000 people moving together? They trampled violently and cruelly ravaged along the way. Like a huge chopper, they easily stabbed into the fat and tender pork and tore a big hole in an instant. Regarding the heavy cavalry battalion that Jiangpengji had invested a lot of money to build, the generals were perturbed and the strategists frowned. Before this, there were heavy cavalry, but the scale was very small. It was difficult for them to achieve great things. Firstly, there were technical limitations. The iron-making technology was not mature. Secondly, there were financial limitations. The cost of making armor was too high. In the eyes of the strategists and the generals, the heavy cavalry were not soldiers. They were a moving mountain of gold and silver. They had no idea how powerful the heavy cavalry was. Seeing the destructive power of the heavy cavalry from afar, Fengzhen directly inhaled a breath of cold air and said, golden words. Chapter 1009. Fengzhen couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. If they had 30,000 well-trained heavy cavalry, it wouldn't be a dream to defeat the northern borderline. Just the 3,000 heavy cavalry is already so powerful. If it's 30,000, won't we be invincible? No matter how smart a strategist was, he couldn't handle enough hooves. They would be beaten by force and crushed by strength. Sun Wen didn't understand the inside story of the formation of the heavy cavalry, but just the cost alone was enough to make him speechless. Although the Lord always wore no makeup and wore an "I'm very poor" look, her real wealth was frighteningly rich. Thinking of the 3 residences Jiangpengji had given him, Sun Wen finally understood how rich Jiangpengji was. Without money, which lord could build 3,000 heavy cavalry and still give him 3 residences? There was one in Xiangyang district of Wanzhou, one in Shangyang County, and one in Chongzhou. The land and house deeds were still hot. Although he only looked at the one in Chongzhou, judging from the appearance of the houses, the other 2 residences were not bad. The 3 residences plus the gold, silver, and jewelry Sun Wen extorted from the northern borderline were enough to feed his grandson Lan Lan for the rest of his life. 30,000? Qiguan Rang laughed. Just the 3,000 is enough to make the Lord's heart ache. Build 30,000 heavy cavalry? That would depend on the storage of the northern borderline's nobles. Wei Ci smiled. It's not impossible. If a few more idiots from the northern borderline come, it'll be done. Sun Wen joined very late. He didn't know where Jiang Pengji's venture fund came from. He thought it was from Lu Shi. However, according to Sun Wen's understanding of Jiang Pengji, the possibility was very small. Hearing Wei Ci say that, he vaguely felt that something was wrong. What does the Lord's expansion of the heavy cavalry have to do with the northern borderline? Qiguan Rang waved his fan to disperse the heat around him. I don't know. The Lord's private storage can reach its current scale because 99% of it was given by the northern borderline. The armor, warhorses, and weapons used by the heavy cavalry were all made with the silver sent from the northern borderline. Isn't it another way of the crow feeding the sheep? It was taken from the people and used for the people. There was nothing wrong with that. Sun Wen was dumbfounded. He had lived for more than 40 years, or about 50 years, and this was the first time he had learned the meaning of the crow feeding, the lamb kneeling on its breast. Sun Wen, he felt that he should say something so that he wouldn't stand out among them. What's there to say? His curiosity was piqued. Wei Ci, who was at the side, briefly explained about the colored glass of the heavenly palace. The more Sun Wen listened, the more solemn his expression became. Sun Wen knew about the colored glass of the heavenly palace. After all, that thing had wreaked havoc in Zhongzhou. However, he didn't suspect that Jiang Pengji was plotting against Zhongzhou. Instead, he felt that Zhongzhou had stolen their technology. Firstly, Jiang Pengji didn't have much territory at that time. The Red Lotus group hadn't been dealt with yet. How could she extend her hand to Zhongzhou? Secondly, Jiang Pengji used the colored glass of the heavenly palace to calculate the wealth of the northern borderline. As a result, a large amount of colored glass of the heavenly palace was released in Zhongzhou, which destroyed the supply and demand market. Jiang Pengji's business could not continue. She could only extort a sum of money from the northern borderline in a hurry before stopping. Her losses were huge, the few of them spoke in low voices. The situation on the battlefield changed rapidly. Shouts of killing shook the heavens and quickly drowned out their voices. The left wing led by Li Yun was as firm as a rock. Fu Wang oversaw the center army and commanded calmly. The right wing led by Jiang Pengji switched from defense to offense. Jiang Nongqin supported them according to the situation. The cavalry of the northern borderline tried to use their speed as fast as the wind to tire the enemy out. They never expected that the enemy's quality on the battlefield was so high that it was frightening. Even if their eyes were red from killing, once the command of the army's battle flag was given, they would choose to give up on attacking and listen to orders. The cavalry of the northern borderline wanted to bypass the front and launch a sneak attack. The enemy's formation immediately turned to defense. While it was watertight, it didn't lack a strong offensive ability. Both sides were fighting non-stop. Jiang Pengji, the Lord, didn't stay idle either. Lang Jun, Jiang Nongqin rushed over with her troops. She didn't dare to call out to her lord. She was afraid that she would expose Jiang Pengji's identity and provoke the cavalry of the northern borderline to counterattack. If they were determined to drag the lord to death, it would be terrible. Nongqin. Jiang Pengji called out. The long sword in her hand was completely bent. It was on the verge of being scrapped. Such a sword would affect her efficiency in killing people. Jiang Nongqin understood. She removed the extra weapons from the back of her horse and charged toward where Jiang Pengji was. You're in command here. Jiang Pengji became more and more brutal when she received new equipment. Jiang Nongqin endured it. In the end, she swallowed her unspoken words. She might be cold to others, but when it came to her lord, she would never be able to say a word of rejection. Jiang Pengji threw the task of commanding the right wing to Jiang Nongqin. It seemed willful and casual, but in fact, she wanted to give her more opportunities to train. Jiang Nongqin managed the women's battalion very well. It was because she did it so well that she spent most of her time training the women's battalion. Most of the battlefield tasks were to provide support, escort rations, clean up the battlefield, and treat the wounded and sick. This was not beneficial to Jiang Nongqin's development. The military camp was a place with strict discipline and a strict hierarchy. Although they were both captains, having military power and not having military power were two different concepts. Jiang Nongqin was the captain of the women's battalion. Her actual military power was second only to Fu Wang. However, her experience in commanding battles was not even as good as Jian Yin and Luo Yu. She immersed herself in her work and did not complain. However, as the Lord, Jiang Pengji could not watch such a good seedling go to waste. The women's battalion was also a knife in Jiang Pengji's hands. Such a knife could not only be used for logistics and trivial matters. Hey, look what I found. Two different big fish. Jiang Pengji's sharp eyes saw two different figures. Her eyes lit up. Most of the cavalrymen of the northern borderline wore cloth clothes and rattan armor. Their equipment was simple and crude. In Jiang Pengji's eyes, they were just a group of weak girls who had no strength to truss a chicken. One knife for one, and a backhand stab for a double kill. Among such a group of girls, who were dressed in shabby clothes, there were two beautiful women, who were dressed in gorgeous palace clothes. Wasn't it eye-catching? In the army, the higher one's status and military power were, the better and more complete the equipment they wore. Needless to say, the two beautiful women in palace clothes were definitely the higher-ups of the northern borderline military. One was dressed in a crimson military uniform, and the other was dressed in an orange-yellow military uniform. She could not pretend not to see such bright colors. She licked her lips. The strong smell of blood stimulated her taste buds, making her feel energized. Seeing that the right flank could not be conquered after a long time and that the army of the northern borderline was howling in pain from the charge of the 3,000 heavy cavalry, the usually calm 8th prince could not hold it in anymore. 8th brother, the traitor Lu is indeed treacherous. Most of the people who were defeated by us just now faked their surrender. The 7th prince was dressed in an orange-yellow military uniform. He looked quite interesting. The 8th prince's face darkened. A hint of gloom flashed across his fair cheeks. Chapter 10:10. After thinking about this, the 8th prince's heart sank. If Jiang Pengji had seen through the trick of pretending to surrender, then there must be something wrong with the military information that the messenger secretly passed to them. They received news that Liu Bei's flanks were weak, and the main force was concentrated in the front. What was the result? They charged several times and lost many cavalries, but they still couldn't break through the enemy's defense line. Looking at the elite troops led by Jiang Pengji, the 8th prince felt powerless. 3 months of hard training would make them elites. Liu Bei's troops had more than 3 months of training. They were truly obedient. As long as the command flag changed, they could change from offense to defense. Whether it was support or something else, their efficiency was frightening. Even if thousands of cavalries from the northern borderline charged together, the soldiers with heavy shields did not even retreat. They looked like they were going to fight with their bodies. At this moment, the 8th prince had a hopeless idea in his mind. How unlucky was the northern borderline to be targeted by these elites? For a moment, countless thoughts flashed through the 8th prince's mind. Before he could come back to his senses, he heard the 7th prince's surprised voice. 8th brother, be careful. The 8th prince subconsciously turned his head. An arrow passed through the heads of 2 cavalries from the northern borderline and finally fell to the ground. Seeing this, the 8th prince was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat. The 8th prince called out, 7th brother. At that moment,
he saw the seventh prince's shoulder being pierced by an arrow. Blood immediately spurted out. He reached out and held the seventh prince who had fallen from the horse. The prince's face was pale and his forehead was sweating from the pain. The seventh prince was considered the lowest among the princes in riding and archery. He did not like to play with swords and spears. When had he ever been so seriously injured? Eighth brother, if you can't do it, leave me alone. The seventh prince's lips were pale and he was bleeding. He endured the pain and persuaded the eighth prince. The two arrows were clearly aimed at us brothers. The eighth prince quickly recalled the thrilling process just now. As the seventh prince said, the two arrows were aimed at them. What nonsense are you talking about? If I leave you behind, am I still human? Although the 9 princes of the northern borderline heard each other, the seventh prince had always taken care of the eighth prince. The eighth prince was not a heartless person. How could he leave his brother behind at this time? It was at this time that a disturbance came from 1,000 feet away. Shouts of killing soared to the heavens. Taking a closer look, he saw that the leading general's eyes were red from killing. He led his men and tore a path out, killing the northern frontier cavalry. The eighth prince took a look and was very sure who had shot the 2 arrows just now. Do you really think there's no one in the northern borderline? The invincible cavalry had stumbled here, unable to break through the enemy's line of defense, which made the eighth prince extremely embarrassed. He reorganized the remaining soldiers around him and planned to compete with Jiang Pengji. No matter how valiant a general was, he was still a human, not a god. As long as one was human, there would come a time when one would run out of energy. Don't look at how this little general had defeated 3 people in a row, but his stamina was probably almost depleted. He could kill a dozen cavalrymen by himself, but he could charge all the way to him and kill more than 100 cavalrymen. The eighth prince steadied his mind. However, he soon miscalculated. Not only did Jiang Pengji not show any signs of exhaustion, but she became more and more courageous as she fought. One slash to kill a little kid. He had already surpassed God. When the distance between them was less than 500 feet, the eighth prince completely panicked. 500 feet was not far, but it was not close either. The eighth prince was sure that the other party was looking at him and smiling at him with blood-stained eyes. Good boys, follow me and kill them. Capture these 2 soft and tender people alive. Jiang Pengji killed the cavalrymen who were surging forward and cut off their long spears. Her attitude was unruly and arrogant. Kill them. Most of the audience was attracted by the fierce fighting on the battlefield. A few of them noticed Jiang Pengji's side. Following Jiang Pengji's valiant posture, which was as if she was cutting melons and vegetables, her fangirls and fangirls were frantically calling her. Shuangyi, I'm cheering for the streamer. She's so handsome that she's straightened up, as straight as a mosquito coil. Shufei CK, pft, the streamer is totally acting like a gangster. What do you mean by, capture these 2 soft and tender people alive, ? Yabao Chengshi, sob, I'm more tender than them. When are you going to capture me? Kuba Bajieti, ever since I watched my Pengpeng's live stream, I feel like I'm more aggressive than my boyfriend. I attack him until his legs turn to jelly. If she didn't attack, how could she be called aggressive? Seeing that the 2 prey were about to escape, Jiang Pengji immediately gave orders to Little White. No prey that I've set my eyes on can escape. It was not easy for the eighth prince to evacuate with his men. The surroundings were in chaos. The cavalrymen were caught in a chaotic battle. Not only could they not give full play to their advantage in speed, but it was also easy to cause crowding and trampling. Jiang Pengji led her men and killed all the way. It was like a sharp blade stabbing into the enemy's flesh. She pulled the blade horizontally and tore a huge hole. The eighth prince panicked and called for his guards to help him and the seventh prince escape,
but how could his guards be a match for Jiang Pengji? At this moment, a noose fell from the sky and caught him. Before the eighth prince could react, the rope suddenly tightened, and a majestic force came from behind him, pulling him backward and forcing him to fall from the horse's back, causing him to tumble. That was not the end. He was dragged along by the rope, and there were horse hooves all around him. The eighth prince's right leg was trampled by a horse's hoof. The bone in his leg made a bone-cracking sound, and he fainted from the pain. Before the eighth prince was trampled to death, Jiang Pengji pulled him up and threw him onto the back of another masterless warhorse, as if throwing something away. Eighth brother, everything happened too suddenly. When the seventh prince reacted, the eighth prince had already been dragged to the ground by Jiang Pengji's rope. His eyes were bloodshot with hatred. The seventh prince used his intact arm to pull out the big sword at his waist and rode toward Jiang Pengji. A hero saving the damsel in distress? If you want to save someone, look at who your grandfather is. Jiang Pengji did not take him seriously at all. She just stabbed his lower abdomen with the handle of the sword. Although it was not fatal, the seventh prince had the illusion that he had been trampled by a horse's hoof. Jiang Pengji used the extra rope to tie the seventh prince's neck. Very good. Captive +1. Look at the armor on your bodies. It's pretty good. Your status in the northern borderline should not be low, right? Jiang Pengji, who had killed until her face was covered in blood, finally had the time to care about her captive. The seventh prince was still somewhat conscious. Blood was flowing from the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were full of monstrous hatred. What do you hate? Jiang Pengji sneered. You barbarians of the northern borderline massacred the 3 cities of Shangyu, bullied the people at the border, kidnapped and killed innocent women and children, tied them up like livestock, and put them on the backs of horses as trophies of war. When did you ever think that this day would come? They killed their husbands' wives and daughters in front of their corpses, and bullied their parents' children in front of their corpses. When did the northern borderline ever think that this day would come? Jiang Pengji would not use such a despicable method to humiliate them, because whoever did such a thing, no matter who it was a beast. Chapter 10-11. Today, I'll teach you one thing: the winner is king, and the loser is a bandit. Jiang Pengji curled her horsewhip in her hand and pressed it against his face, leaving a red mark. The seventh prince pursed his lips and spat a mouthful of blood at Jiang Pengji, but she was already aware of it, so he did not spit on her. He breathed heavily and said, "Cut the crap. You said it yourself, the winner is king, and the loser is a bandit. Those people, they deserve to die. Not to mention the 3 tribes of the northern borderline, even people like you who claim to be benevolent and righteous. When have you ever treated captives kindly? Don't flatter yourself. In this era of cold weapons, captives could not be called people at all, and they did not deserve to be treated like humans. At best, they were just spoils of war. The winner had the right to deal with his spoils of war. This was an unchanging rule. The seventh prince would not repent or feel ashamed. Because the northern borderline won, they had the right to deal with the people of the 3 cities of Shangyu. The men were killed to satisfy their bloodthirsty and violent urges. The women were raped to satisfy their inner desires with their bodies and cries. This was the right of the winner. How could the loser have the face to fight for rights and treatment for himself? Jiang Pengji did not get angry. Instead, she laughed and asked, "According to your logic, is it justified for me to slaughter all the barbarians of the northern borderline?" Although it was a question, Jiang Pengji used a very firm tone of statement. Every word was filled with frightening murderous intent. The seventh prince's body trembled, and his pale face turned livid. "You're not Lu the traitor. Do your words count? Don't be fooled by the seventh prince's righteous words, he was also a standard double standard. When the northern borderline won, they could wantonly slaughter, plunder, and humiliate the enemy. But when they were defeated by the enemy, they could not stand the enemy treating them like that. Jiang Pengji said, "Of course, I mean what I said." The seventh prince was startled. A terrible thought entered his mind, and his increasingly muddled consciousness instantly came back. You are," at that moment, the seventh prince had the illusion of being speechless. If he remembered correctly, the young general in front of him had killed 3 generals of the northern borderline in a row. No, how could she be Lu the traitor? Lu Shi? The seventh prince cried out involuntarily, panting heavily on the horse's back. How could you be Lu Shi? Jiang Pengji lifted her hand and used her little finger to pick her ear. She clicked her tongue. Why are you so surprised? Haven't you seen our lord fight in person? The seventh prince was rendered speechless by her words, and his heart was filled with regret. If they had known that she was Lu Shi, they would have used all sorts of methods to kill her. The seventh prince had forgotten that their acting king had given the order to let off the arrows. What was the result? In the end, not a single hair on Jiang Pengji's body was harmed. How shameful. The seventh prince was drenched in cold sweat as he recalled the conversation between the two of them just now. The shouts of killing around him shook the heavens, giving him great psychological pressure. The Han clan of the Central Plains believes in Confucianism and boasts of being benevolent. Do you really dare to risk universal condemnation and slaughter the entire northern borderline? The seventh prince stared at Jiang Pengji. He was the meat on the chopping block. The scale of the battlefield was tilted towards Jiang Pengji's side. Nearly half of the northern borderline's territory had fallen into her hands. The seventh prince really could not be stubborn anymore. Hearing him say that, Jiang Pengji smiled. I finally understand the saying that morality can restrain a gentleman, but it can't restrain a villain. You can unscrupulously slaughter innocent people in Shangyu, but we can't. Do we have to treat you well? Jiang Pengji raised her hand and pinched the seventh prince's chin. With a little force, he felt that Jiang Pengji's hand was like a pair of iron pincers, almost crushing his jaw. TSK, your face is really big. The seventh prince was in so much pain that tears came out of his eyes. His wound split open and more fresh, viscous blood gushed out. Jiang Pengji smiled. Don't worry, I won't slaughter everyone in the northern borderline. But from now on, I will make the northern borderline history. Her eyes glinted coldly. The seventh prince's heart skipped a beat, and he had a vague bad feeling. What do you mean? The seventh prince's breathing was rapid, and his pale cheeks were dyed with an abnormal flush. When the people of the northern borderline don't speak the barbarian language, don't know the barbarian language, and even forget where their ancestors came from, this should be considered the extinction of their clan, right? Jiang Pengji smiled like a flower, but in the eyes of the seventh prince, she was as fierce as a Rakshasa. Unfortunately, you won't be able to see it. The seventh prince was so angry that blood rushed to his brain and he fainted. Jiang Pengji sneered in disdain. She lifted her machete and leaped onto Little White's back. She pulled the reins. Little White, let's go. More than 10,000 cavalrymen from the northern borderline were pinned down by Jiang Pengji's army on the left and right, unable to return to defend. On the other hand, the elites of the main force were thrown into disarray by the 3,000 heavy cavalry. The soldiers howled in pain, and the formation of the army was in a mess. When Fu Wang saw this, he decisively ordered the entire army to attack. The elites of the middle army followed behind the heavy cavalry and charged towards the enemy's main force, harvesting the enemy's heads. Kill them. Who told you to hide behind them? The situation changed in the blink of an eye. The sixth prince was so angry that his eyes were bloodshot. The cavalry of the northern borderline had always been successful. How could they fail? The enemy only had 3,000 heavy cavalry. How could they force back their army of more than 100,000? The sixth prince could not accept such a failure, but reality gave him a hard slap in the face. The cavalry of the northern borderline was not always successful. They had kicked an iron plate. Whoever dares to take a step back will be killed without mercy. The sixth prince drew his sword and killed a few soldiers who were fleeing backward in an attempt to stabilize the army's morale. However, it was all too late. The 3,000 heavy cavalry charged forward in a crushing manner as soon as they arrived. They killed the people of the northern borderline and caused a great deal of psychological pressure. Before the heavy cavalry was exhausted, Fu Wang led the army to rush over. Not only did he support the exhausted heavy cavalry, but he also took over the baton from them. He further suppressed the fighting spirit of the northern borderline and completely destroyed their courage. The morale of the army of the northern borderline was already low. It was even more impossible for them to fight now. Acting king, retreat. The general of the northern borderline protected the sixth prince. His resolute face revealed a rare vulnerability, and his eyes were bloodshot. If we retreat now, we still have a chance. The fighting spirit of the northern borderline had been exhausted. If they did not retreat, their losses would only increase. At such a time, the main general should retreat decisively to prevent losses. The sixth prince gritted his teeth unwillingly. If they retreated now, wouldn't that traitor Lu take advantage of the victory to pursue them? Retreat, retreat into the royal city. If we don't retreat now, it will be too late. At this moment, the first prince, dressed in armor and covered in blood, rushed over on horseback. His eyes were filled with fatigue. The sixth prince clenched his fists angrily and squeezed out a word, retreat. What could he do even if he was unwilling? He did not want to lose his life here. The third prince followed closely behind the first prince. After the fierce battle just now, he had several wounds on his body and was covered in blood. Retreat now? The first prince roared, third prince, if we don't retreat now, we won't have a chance to leave. The third prince's eyes widened. His brown pupils were filled with sorrow as if he was about to cry. Chapter 10-12. After several battles, most of the northern borderline cavalry had been lost. If they withdrew their main force, what would happen to the cavalry still fighting on the front line? Abandon them? The northern borderline could not afford this loss. The third prince knew very well that if they gave up the cavalry now, they would only be struggling at death's door. You still have time to care about that? The first prince was so angry that he almost fainted. Do you want to die if you don't withdraw now? The third prince shuddered, seemingly stunned by the first prince's words. After a while, he said dryly, without the cavalry, how can we stop Lu Luo? Hide in King City? Their King City was probably no different from a piece of paper in the eyes of the enemy, right? The people of the Central Plains made a living by farming. Their living environment was relatively fixed, so they would build high cities and thick walls to block outside attacks. The three tribes of the northern borderline were nomadic and liked to live by the water. They had no fixed residence and were very mobile, so their houses were all tents that were easy to dismantle and move. Under such circumstances, the city walls were not very useful to them, so there were very few cities in the northern borderline. The so-called King City was built to show the uniqueness of the northern borderline's imperial court. It was specially built to imitate the capital of the Central Plains. To put it bluntly, it was just a shoddy construction. The third prince wept in his heart and complained, Lu Luo has fought many sieges. Can a mere King City really stop them? No matter what, they could not give up on the cavalry at the front. Slap, a loud slap sounded, and a palm print appeared on the third prince's face. After a few breaths, half of his face swelled up. Boost the morale of others and diminish our own. Are you a spy sent by Lu Luo? If you want to die, I can grant you death. The sixth prince retracted his hand and said sinisterly, I am the acting king. I have the final say in everything. Now, withdraw." The third prince looked at his brother in disbelief, his eyes full of shock and disappointment. The sixth prince gave the order to withdraw. Not long after, there was a knock on the door. They advanced at the sound of drums and retreated at the sound of metal. Fu Wang heard the movement and revealed a somewhat blood-stained smile. "You want to withdraw now? It's too late." After saying that, he ordered the left and right wings to change their movements and sent another 20,000 soldiers from the middle army to cut off the northern borderline cavalry's retreat. The rest of the troops followed him to chase after the remnants of the northern borderline. They chased and fought along the way, eating up the enemy soldiers that were left behind bit by bit, chasing them all the way to the foot of the city. The bloody battle lasted until sunset before it gradually stopped. The orange-red setting sun shone on the earth, dyeing it with a desolate color. Monarch City stood on the horizon, but the city walls could not bring the slightest sense of security to the northern kingdom. The north borderline suffered heavy losses, while Jiangpengji returned victorious. That was fun. Today's killing was really fun. Fu Wang's armor was drenched in blood, and the joints of his armor were stained with bits of flesh. He looked like a ferocious ghost that had crawled out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. The most eye-catching thing was that he was holding two helmeted heads in his hands. No one felt that he had done a bad job at such a rude behavior. Instead, they were curious about the owner of the two heads. However, there was always an exception. Jiang Nongqin secretly frowned. "General Fu, are you bringing these two heads here to offer them to my lord as a side dish?" When they got slightly closer to Fu Wang, the soaring smell of blood almost suffocated them. Fu Wang's ability to command the three armies and kill two of the enemy's generals was not to be underestimated. The smile on Fu Wang's face froze for a moment. Seeing that the person who spoke was Jiang Nongqin, he could not retort. There were no women in the military camp. No one could be underestimated. Fu Wang did not have much contact with Jiang Nongqin, but he knew that she was not to be trifled with. Not to mention anything else, the female camp was in charge of the entire casualty camp. Perhaps one day, his life would be on the line and he could count on her to save him. "Officer Jiang, what kind of person is the Lord? How could she eat raw meat and drink blood like the barbarians?" Jiang Nongqin said coldly, "If that's the case, the general should find a box to put it in, so as not to disturb the Lord." Fu Wang was speechless. Li Yun heard the conversation between the two. Seeing that Jiang Nongqin had left, he said, "She cares a lot about the Lord. General, don't take it to heart." Fu Wang glanced at Li Yun with a hidden bitterness in his eyes, making him feel baffled. "I understand. Is the Lord the most important?" It was just a few words, but the sourness was enough to make a person fall down. Fu Wang was not angry at Jiang Nongqin, he was just touched by the scene. Huijuan's letters were always addressed to the Lord. Most of them were to report that she was safe or to send her regards. Occasionally, she would also share the growth of the twins. Fu Wang even saw that there were two children's ink footprints on the letters. She would only mention his name in 3 to 5 letters. He was jealous and envious. He did not dare to hate. Huijun was like this, Jiang Nongqin was the same, and the other female soldiers in the female camp also worshipped the Lord like a god. Tisk, it's useless to like her. Just give up, the Lord is a woman. Fu Wang muttered softly. He ordered someone to prepare 2 boxes for him to place the enemy generals' heads. To the general, the enemy generals' heads were not just heads, but also meritorious deeds and glory. The value of these 2 heads could at least be exchanged for a lifetime of rouge and cosmetics for the precious daughter of Huijuan's family. Beheading the general's head was nothing. The biggest gain from this battle was the annihilation of the remaining cavalry of the north borderline and the capture of a large number of warhorses. The undamaged warhorses were kept as spoils of war, the seriously injured and disabled ones were kept as reserve rations, and the enemy's warhorses that had died in battle were used as food. To be honest, the living conditions of the generals and soldiers were extremely difficult. They had attacked the north borderline for more than half a year, and they could hardly eat meat. Fighting a war was tiring, but the heavy work of dealing with the aftermath was even more tiring. For example, when cleaning up the battlefield, the arrows that were lost had to be retrieved. Most of the swords, spears, swords, and halberds that were lost on the battlefield could be recycled and reused. The clothes and armor on the enemy's corpses could also be reused by sewing and mending them. There were also the heavy goods that the enemy camp did not have time to take away. In addition to these tasks, rescuing the wounded soldiers was an even more urgent matter. Half of the soldiers did not die on the battlefield, but because they did not receive timely treatment after the battle. Jiang Pengji turned off the streaming room and planned to take a bath in the main tent to clean up the blood on her body. Everyone was too busy. Clean hot water was needed for the wounded soldiers, so Jiang Pengji did not bother others. She directly exchanged a large basin of water from the system store and washed up. When she jumped into the bathtub wearing the innermost inner garment, the basin that was originally so clear that the bottom could be seen was instantly dyed red. After changing a few basins of water in a row, she was barely able to wash herself clean. Although the smell of blood still lingered around her body that could not be dispelled, it was much better than before. "My lord, Wei Xiai requests to see you." Jiang Pengji said, "Zixiao, come in." The curtain of the tent was lifted, and Wei Xiai came in carrying a heavy food box. He walked around the simple screen and saw Jiang Pengji in a pine green gown. The belt was loosely tied, and her long wet black hair was casually draped over her shoulders. Her face had a natural blush that was unique after a bath. Her dark eyes were bright and full of spirit. No one dared to look at her directly for fear of profaning her. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.